Chapter 605. Qin Yining sneered. Li Gonggong is a close attendant of the Empress Dowager. This king's fey can't say much, but I will remember this matter. When I go to the palace to pay my respects, I will definitely mention it to the Empress Dowager. If someone is blind enough to bribe the Empress Dowager's eunuchs to sow discord between the monarch and his subjects, wouldn't they be looking for the country to fall into chaos? Right now, Your Majesty's whereabouts are unknown. The Taytan in the north is restless. Many of the important officials in the court have died because of this accident. This is the most difficult time for our Dezhou. You came here on the Empress Dowager's edict to rescue Your Majesty, but you don't make things convenient for Your Majesty. Instead, you sow discord between the imperial family and the officials. What are your intentions? Qin Yining's words were reasonable. His words were like pearls. His voice was not loud, but it was heard clearly by the tired and sweaty soldiers present. Your Majesty is the hero who founded the country. Prince Zhongshuan is the hero who founded the country. The soldiers all worship the Son of Heaven and the God of War, Wang Yi. Wang Fei was just sitting in the shade of a tree and watching from afar. She wouldn't point fingers or get in the way. This eunuch came to cause trouble and even tried to frame Wang Fei. Wasn't he asking for a beating? Some soldiers couldn't stand it anymore. They angrily threw away the large rocks they were carrying and cracked their fingers. Li Weiliang was pressured by Qin Yining's imposing manner and was stared at by so many malicious eyes. His face was red. He wanted to argue, but he couldn't win against the other party. He was so anxious that his forehead was covered in sweat. When Jiziyu and Qin Huayuan hurried over, they saw this scene. Qin Huayuan silently sighed in relief. He had just sprained his ankle. He had been anxious and had gritted his teeth to endure it, afraid that his daughter would be bullied. Now, he was in so much pain that he couldn't stand steadily. Jiziyu quickly supported Qin Huayuan. "Uncle Qin, are you all right?" "It doesn't matter." Qin Huayuan smiled. Jiziyu then ordered his subordinates. "You guys support old Qin." "Yes." The attendant immediately came forward to support Qin Huayuan. Jiziyu strode forward. Although there were streaks of dust on his face, it did not diminish his cool and handsome appearance. "What's the matter?" His stern eyes cast a sidelong glance at Li Weiliang. Li Weiliang was stared at by the murderous eyes and took 2 steps back. Only then did he remember what he was here for. "I am here on the Empress Dowager's order to assist Lord Wang in the rescue operation." The families of the other officials on the mountain had already left the mountain, but Prince Zhongshuan's family refused to listen to the Empress Dowager's edict and even slandered our family. "When we return to the palace, we must." "I understand." Without waiting for Li Weiliang to finish his threat, Jiziyu continued. "Prince Zhongshuan's consort is very resourceful. She can even help to come up with ideas here and put in a lot of effort to rescue Your Majesty. Naturally, she is different from the other officials' families. Eunuch Li can tell the Empress Dowager that Prince Zhongshuan's consort was invited by me to help rescue Your Majesty. The Empress Dowager will naturally not blame Eunuch Li for not doing a good job." Jiziyu's voice was low and cold. He spoke neither fast nor slow and carried a hint of indifference, but it was hard to disobey. In addition, he rarely spoke so much in one breath. This time, he actually spoke so much for the sake of Qin Yining, which inevitably attracted the attention of his subordinates. Li Weiliang was furious and said unwillingly, "But don't tell me Eunuch Li doesn't believe my words." "No, I don't dare. I just go and tell the Empress Dowager. If the Empress Dowager doesn't believe me, then send someone to ask me." Jiziyu turned around and said to Qin Yining, "Wang Fei can do as she pleases. If she is tired, she can go down the mountain to rest. She can also come up the mountain at any time. If anyone dares to stir up trouble and affect Wang Fei's efforts to rescue Your Majesty, I will cut off their heads." Qin Yining didn't expect Jiziyu to speak up for her. Her previous ill feelings towards Jiziyu had mostly disappeared. She remembered this kindness and nodded in thanks. Many thanks to Jiziyu. Jiziyu lowered his eyes to look at Qin Yining. His gaze seemed to be sizing her up. Then he smiled in relief and waved his hand, saying, "What happened here is a small matter. The important thing is that Qin Yining uncle has sprained his ankle. Qin Yining turned pale with fright. He looked at Qin Huaiyuan, who was being supported by others, and asked anxiously, "Father, are you okay?" "It's fine. It's not a big matter. It didn't hurt my muscles or bones." Qin Huaiyuan cupped his hands towards Jiziyu and limped towards Qin Yining. Qin Yining hurriedly went to support him. Bing Tang and Jiyan also hurriedly went forward to protect the two. "Father, please sit down. Let Bing Tang take a look." Speaking up to here, she complained, "Father, why didn't you say earlier that you were injured? You had to endure and not say anything. If Prince Consort Ji didn't say anything, were you planning to hide it from your daughter?" Qin Huaiyuan was reprimanded by his daughter, but he only smiled and shook his head. He didn't refute. Li Weiliang was left to the side. No one paid any attention to him. He gritted his teeth so hard that they creaked. Jiziyu was the prince consort, and the Empress Dowager was his mother-in-law. Not only did he not side with the people in his mother-in-law's palace, he even helped outsiders to make him lose face. Li Weiliang had suffered losses at the hands of Jiziyu twice in 2 days. He hated Jiziyu and immediately left in a huff. Qin Yining saw Li Weiliang leave and asked Jiziyu worriedly, "Prince Consort Ji, do you want to send someone to explain the situation to the Empress Dowager first? If Li Weiliang gossips in front of the Empress Dowager, I'm afraid it will affect your relationship with Anyang, eldest princess." "It's fine." Jiziyu didn't explain further. "Your Majesty is still buried in the underground palace. Those people still have the mood to sow discord. I think they're tired of living. Right now, I'm busy rescuing your Majesty and can't free myself. After your Majesty is rescued, I'll take a good look at them and see if they've grown up." After Jiziyu finished speaking, he took the map and led his subordinates to continue digging. Qin Yining looked at Jiziyu's back for a long time. He couldn't help but worry and whisper to Qin Huaiyuan, "Father, Prince Consort Ji offended the eunuchs. I'm afraid it's not a good thing. That Li Weiliang's character is not good, and he likes to bully others and gossip. Right now, your Majesty is not in the palace. The Empress is pregnant, and the Empress Dowager is in charge of the situation. I'm afraid it's not good to listen to slanderous words." Qin Huaiyuan nodded and said in a low voice, "It's not that Prince Consort Ji isn't smart. It's just that his personality dictates it. Now that his Majesty is in danger, I'm afraid that Prince Consort Ji is overly anxious for his Majesty's sake, which is why he spoke so rudely. It's dangerous to offend the eunuchs. Father will need to persuade him later." Qin Yining nodded and said, "Father is right. Prince Consort Ji is a good friend to Wang Yi. We can't sit by and do nothing when we see that the situation is not right." While speaking, Bing Tang had already examined Qin Huaiyuan's injury. Seeing that his right ankle was swollen like a steamed bun, she didn't care about their relationship as master and servant. She opened her mouth and sternly reprimanded Qin Huaiyuan. Although his bones haven't been injured, the muscles around his ankle are severely sprained. He won't be able to walk for at least half a month. Don't you feel pain? How can you endure for such a long time? Qin Huaiyuan was reprimanded by the little lass. He could only smile bitterly and say, "It doesn't hurt that much. Then you can't continue to walk around. What will you do if you end up with a permanent injury and become lame in the future?" Upon hearing that there was a danger of being lame, Qin Huaiyuan didn't say anything. Qin Yining was already anxious. He hurriedly ordered the Jinghu Wei who was protecting him and said anxiously, "Quickly set up a carriage and send his esteemed master back to the prince's estate to recuperate." "That won't do. If you want to go back, you have to go back with me," Qin Huaiyuan said with a sullen expression. "Otherwise, don't even think about making Father leave by himself." Qin Yining shook his head. "Father, listen to me. I don't want to stay here forever. My body is fine right now. If there's a problem, you don't need to say anything. I will go back by myself. Am I not afraid of harming the child in my womb? Father's injury is different. It is more important for you to recuperate. If you delay it for too long, what will happen if it develops into a serious illness?" Qin Huaiyuan was speechless. At this time, the two Jinghu Wei had already arrived. They directly lifted Qin Huaiyuan and gently placed him on the carriage. Qin Huaiyuan said helplessly, "Look at these little monkeys. They usually listen to me but now they only listen to you. The Jinghu Wei was loyal to Pang Xiao. When Pang Xiao wasn't here, they naturally listened to Wang Fei. Qin Yining saw that his father wasn't angry and urged, "Quickly go home. With you in charge of the Fu, I can rest assured. I will be fine here." There's also Prince Consort Ji. Qin Huaiyuan was a scholar and wasn't young. Originally, there wasn't much use for him to stay and help. He had only stayed because he was afraid that Qin Yining would be in danger. Now, not only was he injured and became a burden, he also saw Ji Ziyu's actions. He didn't feel any scheming or enmity in Ji Ziyu's eyes, only the protection of loyalty. Thus, he relaxed. It wasn't easy to argue. He could only leave with his attendants. Qin Yining watched as Qin Huaiyuan left before he relaxed. Just as he sat down, he saw Lu Heng standing not far away. He didn't know how long he had been watching. He smiled and said, "Lu boy." His attitude was casual and natural. Because they were very familiar with each other, Qin Yining didn't specially stand to salute. Seeing that she treated him like before, Lu Heng's heart relaxed. He knew that Qin Huaiyuan didn't say anything about him to Qin Yining after they parted. He slowly walked forward and asked worriedly, "Is old Qin Darren's injury all right?" "It should be fine. How is the excavation going?" Lu Heng frowned worriedly and shook his head. "The first tomb has been cleaned up. After checking, we found that the only important people left in the underground palace should be Your Majesty, Prince Zhongshuan, and Your Majesty's personal chief, Steward Li, and some bodyguards." The moment the explosion occurred, a huge rock fell and blocked the entrance to the tomb. "I don't know how Your Majesty and Wang Yi are doing." Chapter 606. Lu Heng looked at Qin Yining's clear eyes. He was no longer as helpless and weak as he was before the incident. He liked Qin Yining even more when he was this strong. What did Pang Xiao do to deserve this? How could he have such a woman as his wife? If Pang Xiao could let Qin Yining live a peaceful life, it would be fine and he wouldn't feel so distressed. But what did Pang Xiao bring to Qin Yining's life? Whether before or after marriage, Qin Yining had to go through trials and hardships with Pang Xiao, and each time he had a narrow escape. The reason he could survive was not because Pang Xiao protected him well, but because Qin Yining was smart. Why should such a good woman be mistreated by Pang Xiao? That boorish man. Lu Heng's thoughts flashed like lightning, but unwillingness sprouted in his heart. At this time, Qin Yining was watching the soldiers escorting the surviving officials or ordering people to carry the corpses down mountain. He didn't notice the strange look that flashed through Lu Heng's eyes. At this time, the palace was like a black cloud pressing down on the city. The palace servants had to tiptoe as they walked, afraid that the slightest movement would disturb their master who was in a bad mood and bring disaster to themselves. Ever since the incident at the Imperial Mausoleum on Mount Chongshan, 2 of the Empress Dowager's palace maids had been dragged out and beaten to death. At this time, in Xian Palace, the Empress Dowager was sitting at the head of the table with a gloomy face. The Empress's face was pale, and she cried helplessly. The clan relatives brought their womenfolk and accompanied the Empress Dowager like Princess Royal of Anyang, quietly waiting for the news. The Empress Dowager was upset and worried about Li Qitian's situation. She was so anxious that she couldn't eat. Seeing the Empress still crying, the Empress Dowager said irritably, "Okay, don't cry. You're pregnant, so you should pay more attention to the imperial heir in your womb." There was no need for the Empress Dowager to elaborate. Everyone understood. If Your Majesty really met with misfortune and the Empress gave birth to a prince, he would be the only candidate for the crown prince. The clan relatives all maintained their silence, each with their own thoughts. The Empress was moved. She wiped her tears and nodded. "Imperial Mother is right. I will definitely take good care of myself." "Yes, that's right." This time, Your Majesty encountered danger in Mount Zao because of a note sent by the monk named Tianjizi. On the day of the Holy Birthday banquet, I felt that the content of the note was unusual. However, Your Majesty was concerned about the people and was worried that the Titan would attack. The treasury was also tight, so you could only think of a way to get the treasure. Your Majesty has worked hard for the country. We are ashamed. The clan relatives had all been conferred titles of nobility, and there were also some who held idle positions in the imperial court. However, no one held any real power. At this moment, all they could do was go along. The Empress Dowager sighed and said, "We're all family. Aijia won't say such polite words. Now that your majesty is missing and the Titan is ready to make a move, we don't know what kind of storm Dezhou's imperial court will face. The officials in the imperial court have also suffered many casualties because of this matter. This is the time when Dezhou is in chaos and is at its most tense. During this period of time, we still have to rely on our clan relatives. In any case, we have to help our own people." The Empress Dowager wasn't very educated, so her words were very straightforward. However, everyone knew what she meant. The reason why the clan relatives were able to live a carefree life was because Li Qiqian was the emperor. If something really happened to Li Qiqian, he didn't have a male heir who could immediately shoulder the burden of being the crown prince. At that time, not to mention the Titan, even if there was a traitor in the imperial court, it would be enough for the clan relatives to suffer. If they wanted to protect their glory and wealth, they had to stabilize Dezhou's country. If Dezhou's country was surnamed Li, then they would have an endless supply of gold and silver. Thus, everyone stood up at this time and bowed to the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager is wise and wise. The Empress Dowager nodded and said, "Tomorrow morning at the morning court, all fourth-rank officials who are still alive in the capital, regardless of civil or military, will come to Fengtian Palace to discuss politics. Although Aijia is a woman, Aijia can't ignore the country. When the time comes, Aijia will discuss with this subject how to deal with the situation." The Empress was shocked when she heard this. The Emperor wasn't here, so the Empress Dowager wanted to monopolize power. The Empress Dowager, who usually seemed very easy to talk to, was actually so valiant at this critical moment. She actually thought of this method and even had the courage to carry it out. It was truly shocking. The Empress Dowager sat at the head of the table. She held the teacup and played with the lid. Li Helan saw the Empress' shocked expression and asked provocatively, "Does Imperial sister-in-law have any ideas? Right now, our family is talking behind closed doors. If you have any ideas, just say it. Imperial Mother won't stop you." The Empress's maternal family wasn't strong, and her personality was kind and gentle. She was a diligent and thrifty housekeeper. However, as the mother of the country, her personality was too soft. She really couldn't handle it. Her husband was missing, and she was a pregnant woman. Now that the Empress Dowager had clearly revealed her intentions, if she had any intentions of stopping her, she was afraid that the child in her belly wouldn't be able to be born safely. Thinking of this, the Empress hurriedly shook her head and said, "Eldest princess is joking. How could I have any ideas? Right now, I don't have any backbone. Everything will be done according to Imperial Mother's arrangements." Li Helan raised the corner of her mouth in satisfaction. She thought to herself, "You wouldn't dare?" Everyone present could see everything clearly. They had already estimated their own positions and had an idea of what to do next. Percent Qin Yining stayed on the mountain and didn't return home for a full 3 days. She didn't eat or use anything. The Jingji guards took turns digging day and night. Finally, they opened the second tomb. However, other than the corpses of a few imperial bodyguards, there was no trace of Li Qiqian, Pang Xiao, or Li Guanwen. When they went inside, an even harder rock fell down, separating the second tomb from the inside of the underground palace. What should we do? It's already been 3 days. The people who did the geological survey found that this place is full of hard rock. It's not easy to dig. There are also large rocks blocking the way. Qin Yining closed her eyes. She was now certain that Pang Xiao didn't die when the bomb ignited the tomb and caused it to collapse. He must have gone into the underground palace. However, it's been 3 days. There's no food or drink inside. She didn't know if the air circulation was good or bad. In this situation, she was even more anxious than before. Jiziu hadn't slept well for 3 days. His eyes were bloodshot, his chin was full of stubble, his hair was messy, and his face was dirty. However, he still calmly commanded the people. Continue digging. One of the attendants persuaded Jiziu. Prince Consort, you should rest first. Have a good sleep and wash up. Your body can't take it. Jiziu stared expressionlessly in the direction of the underground palace. His hoarse voice was still cold. Don't worry about me. As long as your majesty is in the underground palace, I will not go down Chongshan. These days, thanks to Jiziu's care, Qin Yining's impression of him had changed. As the saying goes, a friend in need is a friend indeed. Whether Jiziu was loyal to your majesty, out of friendship with Pang Xiao, or out of the importance of saving people, Qin Yining was very grateful to him. Seeing Jiziu's ugly expression, Qin Yining also advised him, Prince Consort Ji, you should rest. Even if your body is made of iron, you won't be able to withstand working without sleep or rest. If you fall, who will take charge of this place? I'm just a woman. I definitely can't control the overall situation. Jiziu rubbed the space between his eyebrows. He knew that Qin Yining was right. He said helplessly, all right, then I'll rest for a while. Qin Yining said, Prince Consort Ji, go back to the city and wash up. It won't be too late to come back after you've slept enough. You can ride a horse back and forth. There's no need for that. He cupped his hands towards Qin Yining. Thank you for your kindness. After he finished speaking, he turned around and found a mattress on the floor. He lay down flat and crossed his arms over his chest. Ignoring the noise around him, he closed his eyes and fell asleep. Qin Yining shook his head. He knew that Jiziu was extremely tired, so he didn't disturb him any further. Instead, he focused on looking in the direction of the excavation. At this moment, Jiziu's trusted aide suddenly came up the mountain with Jing Zhe. Qin Yining looked at Jing Zhe in shock and worry as he approached. He asked, Did something happen at home? Nothing happened at home. Master ordered me to come up the mountain to pass a message to the princess consort. Qin Yining immediately understood that something big must have happened. Otherwise, Qin Huaiyuan wouldn't have hurriedly sent someone up the mountain. Qin Yining stood up and was supported by Bing Tang and Ji Yun. He followed Jing Zhe to a place that was far away from the crowd. After they stood still, he didn't immediately ask questions. He waited for Jing Zhe to make sure that there was no one around before he said, Early this morning, the Empress Dowager presided over the morning court. The ministers requested that Prince Li be the regent and that your majesty be changed from red to blue. Furthermore, the Empress Dowager will hold court behind a curtain. The Empress Dowager nodded, and the loyal ministers all agreed. Qin Yining's eyebrows twitched. Who is Prince Li? I don't remember your majesty having a biological brother. He also doesn't have any children. It's no wonder that the princess consort doesn't know. Prince Li has just returned to the capital. He is Wang Ye's younger cousin. He is 27 years old and only has one daughter. Master said that Prince Li has a gentle temperament. If Prince Li is the regent, he can be reduced in prison. Qin Yining immediately understood Qin Huaiyuan's meaning. A gentle prince was easy to manipulate for the ministers and the Empress Dowager. Furthermore, he only had one daughter. If something happened to Li Qiqian, Prince Li would be conferred the title of Emperor's younger brother. In the future, if the Empress gave birth to a son, the throne would continue to be passed on to Li Qiqian's son. The Empress Dowager looked like an ordinary village woman. Who would have thought that she would show her claws at such a critical moment? It was true that one couldn't judge a book by its cover. However, did the current de Zhou really need a puppet regent who was as easy to manipulate as cotton? Qin Yining had been worried about Pang Xiao these days and didn't have time to think about the situation in the imperial court. However, since the Tianjizi had laid out such a big game of chess, it was impossible for them not to seize the time to make a plan. At this time, the Taitan might have already decided to mobilize their troops. Could a weak and indecisive regent be a deterrent to the country's war? Thinking of this, Qin Yining even felt that Li Qiqian was better than them as the emperor. Qin Yining's thoughts turned in an instant. Jing Zhe's following words stunned Qin Yining even more. Chapter 607. This is absurd. Qin Yining gritted his teeth and said angrily, The Marquis of Qingyang is good at indulging in debauchery, but he stopped fighting early on. How can he command the 100,000 tiger army? The Marquis of Qingyang, Zhou Deong, was the Empress Dowager's youngest brother. He was Li Qiqian's uncle. The Empress Dowager was taking advantage of the fact that the emperor was trapped in the underground palace to control the court and support her relatives. The Tiger Army was trained by Pang Xiao, who knew how much blood, sweat, and tears he put into it. Qin Yining was quite calm to hand it over to Jiziyu, a war god who was as famous as Pang Xiao. But how could Qin Yining be willing to hand it over to someone like the Marquis of Qingyang? This is absurd. Now that the internal and external troubles have not been resolved, the Empress Dowager wants to seize power and support her family. Such a woman is too abominable. Where does she place the people of the country? Princess Consort, don't be angry, Bing Tang advised. We can't do anything about these things. Don't tire yourself out because of these things. That's right. Jingzhe also said, Master said to let Princess Consort know of this news so that you can have a grasp of the situation in the court. This way you won't be caught off guard. But Master also said that you should prioritize your health and the little air in your womb. Master also said that everything is fine at home and that he will take care of the situation, so you don't have to worry. Qin Yining took several deep breaths to calm himself down. He nodded and said, I'm fine. I also know that I can only complain about these things in my heart. Go back and tell my father that I'm fine and that the situation on the mountain is stable. Tell him not to worry. Yes. Jingzhe bowed and left the mountain. Qin Yining stood in place and looked at the scenery for a while. He took several deep breaths and suppressed the irritation in his heart before returning to the excavation site with the two servant girls. At this moment, the head eunuch, Li Weiliang, who had been thwarted twice by Jiziyu, had just finished reading the Empress Dowager's edict. He looked at Jiziyu with a faint smile. Prince Consort Ji, you didn't expect this, did you? Jiziyu had just taken a short nap, and his eyes were even redder than before. His handsome face was still expressionless, and there was no trace of anger, unwillingness, or fear after being dismissed from his position. He just looked at Li Weiliang indifferently. Eunuch Li must be joking. I'm just an official, and I only follow orders. Since the Empress Dowager and the ministers all feel that the Marquis of Qingyang is of great use, then it's natural for him to be given the position of Commander-in-Chief of the Tiger Army. The Tiger Tally and Command Tablet are here. I'll have to trouble Eunuch Li to bring them back. As he spoke, he happily took out 2 brocade pouches from his bosom and directly handed them to Li Weiliang. Li Weiliang took the brocade pouches with both hands and put them into his bosom. He even proudly patted his chest and moved closer to Jiziyu, saying in a low voice, Prince Consort Ji, you've humiliated me several times. I'll let you know that you can't do whatever you want just because you're the Commander-in-Chief of the Tiger Army. I'm most trusted by the Empress Dowager. If you humiliate me, you'll be humiliating the Empress Dowager. If the eldest princess doesn't like you, you're just an unvalued prince consort. What's the difference between you and an unfavored concubine from a wealthy family? Jiziyu quietly listened to Li Weiliang's words. He sneered, Are you done? I'm done. Li Weiliang also sneered. Jiziyu raised his chin at the attendant beside him and said, Tie up Eunuch Li. Follow the eunuchs who delivered the edict into the palace and tell the Empress Dowager what Eunuch Li said. This Marquis handed over the Tiger Tally and Command Tablet because the Empress Dowager's imperial decree is for the sake of the imperial court and the people. But Eunuch Li said that the Empress Dowager is a tool for him to take revenge on this Marquis. He's looking down on the Empress Dowager. What does he think of the Empress Dowager? This Marquis suggests that the Empress Dowager consider carefully before using this kind of servant. As he spoke, the attendant had already sealed Li Weiliang's mouth with a rag and handed the 2 brocade pouches that he had kicked into his bosom to another attendant who had come with Li Weiliang. Li Weiliang couldn't struggle free from the thick hemp rope. He wanted to curse, but couldn't. Thus, he was taken away by the attendant and Jiziyu's attendant. Jiziyu watched the group of people descend the mountain with a sullen expression. His gaze gradually became vacant. Finally, he looked up at the gloomy sky and said, It's going to rain. Qin Yining looked at Jiziyu's bleak back and felt uncomfortable. It was the desolate feeling of a hero at the end of his road. This feeling was too inauspicious and made Qin Yining feel very uncomfortable. She wanted to say a few words of advice, but she wasn't familiar with Jiziyu. She didn't have the right to speak. At this time, if Pang Xiao was here, Pang Xiao would definitely be able to console her. Qin Yining turned around and looked at the messy scene of stones and soil at the excavation site. Her brows furrowed tightly again. Tian Jizi's calculations were flawless. She had played a good game of chess and included all the people standing at the top of the Dezhou imperial court. She had almost wiped out all the important officials in the imperial court. For the sake of Tatan's success, she was truly unscrupulous. But in Tian Jizi's calculations, wasn't Pang Xiao the Ziwei Emperor's star? Tian Jizi trusted her calculations so much. Why did she help a greedy wolf star to harm the Ziwei Emperor's star? Wasn't this slapping her own face? Qin Yining couldn't figure out what Tian Jizi was thinking, but one thing was certain. Tian Jizi was no longer a friend or foe, but had clearly become her enemy. A drop of rain fell on the tip of Qin Yining's nose. The cool feeling brought her back from her thoughts. The drizzle fell, and the dark sky pressed down. A light rain turned into a heavy rain in the blink of an eye. Qin Yining was escorted to the carriage to avoid the rain. Jiziyu arranged for the generals to rest in shifts and make a fire to cook. He braved the rain and led the people to dig the tunnel again. Bing Tang and Ji Yun were soaked. Qin Yining's clothes were also slightly damp. It was very uncomfortable to wear them. Bing Tang said, "Wang Fei, you shouldn't force yourself to endure it. It's raining so heavily. If you catch a cold while wearing wet clothes, it's not a joke. You should listen to my advice. Let's go home. Even if you want to come up the mountain, you should pick a good day." Qin Yining also knew that her body couldn't withstand a heavy rain. After 3 days of calming down, her emotions were no longer as agitated as before. She was worried about Pang Xiao, and her heart ached for Pang Xiao's possible situation in the underground palace. Just thinking about it made her body turn cold. However, she also knew that if something were to happen to Pang Xiao, what he hoped for the most was that she would be able to take care of his parents and raise their child well. Although it was easy to die, as long as one could find a strong rope and stick one's neck in, it would be much harder to survive and bear the responsibility. But after Qin Yining's impulsiveness, she knew that she couldn't be so selfish. She didn't want to disappoint Pang Xiao. Qin Yining closed her eyes. Her eyes were sore, and hot tears were hidden in her eyes. But a drop of rainwater fell on her forehead and slid down the corner of her eyes, just like a teardrop. Bing Tang and Ji Yun's hearts ached when they saw this. The two of them almost cried in each other's arms. They understood Qin Yining's pain, but they couldn't watch Qin Yining humiliate herself. After a while, the rain became lighter. Ji Yun got off the carriage and told Jiziyu that Qin Yining wanted to go home. When Jiziyu heard this, he followed Ji Yun to the carriage. His expression relaxed. In the carriage, Qin Yining heard the footsteps and conversation outside. She lifted the curtain and saw Jiziyu's brocade robe covered in mud and rainwater sticking to his body. His hair was also disheveled. She couldn't help but say worriedly, "When I go back, I'll order people to send medicinal herbs and ginger to the mountain. It won't be good if everyone catches a cold. Wang Fei doesn't need to worry about this." Jiziyu wiped the rainwater off his face. He didn't care that there was a mud stain on his handsome face. Instead, he looked seriously at Qin Yining. "Wang Fei, take good care of yourself. If you are well, Wang Yu will be well." Qin Yining met his eyes that were hidden behind the coldness and filled with complicated emotions. Something in her heart was touched. The main point of his exhortation was, without a doubt, Wang Yi will be well. She didn't have much of a relationship with Jiziyu. Jiziyu was doing this for Pang Xiao. Qin Yining looked at Jiziyu, who was drenched in the rain. His disheveled appearance couldn't hide the moonlight. She even felt that the reason he stayed here and worked hard to dig was not for Li Qitian, but for Pang Xiao. "I understand." Qin Yining sighed with complicated emotions. Then she pulled herself together and said with a smile, "Prince Consort Ji, please take care of yourself. I'll go back and change. I'll come back when the weather is better." Jiziyu lowered his eyes. A few drops of rain fell from his long eyelashes that were like butterfly wings. If Wang Fei wants to come, you can come anytime. Even though I don't have an official position, I'm still the Marquis of the North. You don't need to worry about the matters on the mountain. Qin Yining understood that he definitely didn't like being called Prince Consort. What kind of man with a bright future and great ambitions would be willing to marry a princess? Qin Yining changed the way he addressed Jiziyu and said, "With Marquis' ability, I naturally have no worries. I'll take my leave first." Jiziyu's lips curved into a faint smile. He nodded and said, "I'll have someone send you back. There's no need. I'll just have 2 guards from the estate escort me." "No," Jiziyu said, "the world is in chaos now. It's different from the past." As he said this, he turned around and called his trusted aide over. He ordered 6 people to escort Qin Yining back to the city. Qin Yining admitted that he couldn't change Jiziyu's arrangement. He could only thank him for his good intentions. Then he called Huzi over and whispered, "Prince Consort Ji, have someone send me back. You stay here and keep an eye on the news. If there's even the slightest bit of news about Wang Yi, regardless of whether it's good or bad, you have to tell me." Huzi saw that Qin Yining was willing to go down the mountain and return. He naturally agreed to whatever Qin Yining said. "Wang Fei, don't worry. I don't dare to hide anything." When Jiziyu's men were ready, Qin Yining, Bing Tang, and Ji Yun boarded the carriage. Jiziyu's trusted aide drove the carriage and escorted them all the way out of Mt. Chuang. The rain fell on the roof of the carriage, creating a continuous sound. Qin Yining observed through the gaps in the carriage curtains. He found that these northern men were all tall and straight. They had round backs and thin waists. Whether they were riding horses or driving the carriage, they all didn't speak much. They had the solemn aura of a soldier. With one look, he could tell that they weren't ordinary boxers or guards. They were all dressed in military attire. Thinking of Jinghu Wei, who was by Pang Zhao's side, and Jiziyu, who had the same ability as Pang Xiao, how could there not be similar trusted aides by his side? Qin Yining relaxed a lot. He put down the carriage curtains and closed his eyes to rest. However, he was still worried about the situation on the mountain. His brows were filled with worry. Bing Tang and Ji Yun had been working hard on the mountain with Qin Yining for a long time. Now that they saw that Qin Yining was willing to go home, they relaxed and couldn't help but feel drowsy. They traveled peacefully for a quarter of an hour. Suddenly, there was a commotion in front of the carriage, followed by the sound of something heavy falling to the ground. Chapter 608. The 3 of them did not act rashly. They only lifted the curtains slightly and peeked outside. They saw that the 2 leading horses on the official road had been tripped by the ropes. The guard sent by Jiziyu fell to the ground and struggled to get up. They retreated to the side of the carriage. The rest of the guards also took out their weapons and prepared for battle. This was because there were more than 10 people dressed like refugees around the carriage. These people were dressed in tattered clothes, but they did not look weak like refugees. They were all tall and strong, and were even stronger than the guards sent by Jiziyu. They were all holding steel, swords that shone with a cold light. If they were ordinary refugees, how could they find such swords? "Who are you?" The refugees did not say a word. They waved their swords and rushed forward. More than 10 people were imposing, like fierce tigers coming down from the mountains. They were actually using all their strength to take someone's life. The guards did not say anything else. They took out their swords and rushed forward. The 2 groups of people fought together. Jiziyu's trusted aides should be like Jinghu Wei, the elites of the elites. But who would have thought that the other party's abilities were not bad? Moreover, the other party had more people. Jiziyu had only arranged for 6 people. Only 5 of them went forward to fight, and the last one was driving the carriage. Qin Yining's heart skipped a beat. He pulled the curtain tight and turned to Bing Tang and Ji Yun. He said, "The situation is not good. I'm afraid these people are from the Taitan." "What?" Ji Yun covered her mouth. "I've been in the Taitan for so long, and I have some impression of the people there. They do look like Taitan people. Where else can there be such strong refugees? If they're bandits pretending to be refugees, are they robbing because they want to kill people and not for money? In any case, They should at least hand over their valuables and let unrelated people leave. But they didn't say a word. It's obvious that they are coming for me. Bing Tang was so nervous that his face turned pale. But after all, he had been through a lot with Qin Yining. Although he was afraid, he did not panic. He took out a small paper bag containing anesthetic powder from his sleeve and gave one to Qin Yining and Ji Yun. This medicine only needs to be sprinkled on a person's face to make them dizzy. It will have a certain effect. Princess Consort, don't be afraid. We will guard the carriage. If it doesn't work, we will sprinkle the medicine. Yes. Ji Yun also slowly. She pulled her sword. She smiled and said, I don't believe that those barbarians are too strong. If I want to touch you, I'll have to ask the sword in my hand first. Qin Yining saw that although they were scared, they could still stay calm and never leave her. She was gratified and touched. Don't be impulsive, you two. Wait and see the situation clearly. You have to protect yourself. As soon as he finished speaking, the carriage, which had stopped steadily, suddenly rushed forward. The coachman spoke in a northern dialect. His lowered voice was very hoarse. Princess Consort, let's rush out first. Sit tight. Qin Yining grabbed the edge of the window with both hands. The running carriage raised the curtains on both sides. Qin Yining also saw the outside clearly. The 5 guards had actually used their bodies to block him. Qin Yining was so anxious that his eyes turned red. She hated herself for being useless. She could not be of any use at the critical moment and had to implicate others. If something happened to those 5 people in order to protect her, how was she going to repay them? But in the current situation, she could not help at all. The only thing she could do was to stay in the carriage and watch people sacrifice themselves. The carriage rushed forward. The coachman's eyes were already red. He roared as he sped up. In the blink of an eye, he rushed out of the encirclement. The mud on the muddy road left messy marks on the back of the carriage. Even the shafts of the carriage made creaking sounds, as if they would fall apart at any moment. At this moment, there was a sound as the arrow pierced through the air. It hit the coachman's chest. The tip of the arrow came out of his back and blood splattered everywhere. He spat out a large mouthful of blood. He used the last of his willpower to stop the carriage with all his strength. If he died, the rampaging carriage would take the life of the pregnant woman in the carriage. This way, the person in the carriage would have a chance to change the coachman. Princess Consort, Feeling the carriage suddenly stop and hearing the man's muffled groan, Ji Yun lifted the curtains and saw the coachman's body fall to the ground. Blood flowed out of his chest and mouth. He spat out blood foam with his short and labored breaths. Finally, he unwillingly closed his eyes as a trace of blood seeped out of his mouth and nose. Princess Consort, Ji Yun cried out in alarm and was about to drive the carriage. But Qin Yining patted Ji Yun's shoulder and said, Forget it. Don't move for now. Ji Yun raised her head and looked in the direction Qin Yining was pointing. She saw a short man wearing short brown clothes and a 6 harmonies hat. He was wearing a black brocade mask and had his hands clasped behind his back. Beside him was a tall and fierce man. The bow in the man's hand was pulled into a full moon shape, and the tip of the arrow was pointed in the direction of the carriage. Without a doubt, whether it was Ji Yun or Bing Tang, as long as someone dared to drive the carriage, they would end up like the coachman who fell to the ground. Princess Consort, be obedient. Qin Yining raised his voice and said with a smile, Tian Jizi is a divine strategist. He predicted that I would take advantage of the heavy rain to return to the city and was merciful. He didn't have someone kill me with an arrow. He must have something to say to me. If it has nothing to do with you, you are not allowed to come out. Tian Jizi? Ji Yun and Bing Tang's hearts beat wildly as they looked at the short-masked man. The masked man chuckled and pulled off his mask and threw on the ground. Braving the drizzle, he took 2 steps forward with his hands clasped behind his back. The wrinkles at the corners of his eyes turned into 2 chrysanthemums as he smiled. Princess Consort, don't you feel any surprise at meeting an old friend? Qin Yining also got off the carriage and stood still while holding his aching waist. Bing Tang and Ji Yun also got off the carriage and supported Qin Yining on his left and right. Bing Tang stood in front of Qin Yining and called out hesitantly, Shizhen. Io, so it's Jingjun. Tian Jizi shook his head and sighed. Back in Dian, your father entrusted you to Xian Nu's monastery, and you became my little disciple. We can be considered to have a master-disciple relationship. Although you're no longer my disciple, I still remember our old relationship. I won't kill you. Tian Jizi smiled lovingly and waved his hand. You can leave. Bing Tang's hair stood on end when he heard this. He spread his arms and stood in front of Qin Yining. No, Shizuan, you can't kill Princess Consort. She's a good person. Why do you want to kill her? Jingjun, you are a lucky girl. Don't be too stubborn. Be careful that your good fortune turns into a disaster. Why? Why do you want to harm Wang Yi? Why do you want to harm our princess consort? You also said that we have a master-disciple relationship. If it wasn't for Princess Consort's protection, I would have died long ago. Can't you let her go on account of your disciple? When Jian heard this, she also begged. You are an otherworldly expert and a cultivator. Princess Consort is pregnant with twins in her belly. If you kill her, you'll have 3 lives. Aren't you afraid that it will reduce your merit? Jian wanted to forcefully break through, but she couldn't do so now. The man's sharp arrow was pointed at her. What if Princess Consort was accidentally injured? Tian Jizi shook his head and sighed. You guys are too stubborn. What's so good about her, huh? Is she worth your protection? When he looked at Qin Yining, Tian Jizi's eyes suddenly became fierce. If it weren't for you, my plan would have been completed from the beginning. Why would I have delayed it for so many years and caused the world to be in such chaos? Qin Yining could see the anger and madness in Tian Jizi's eyes. He knew that it was useless to plead now. He couldn't run away, so he decided to let go of his thoughts. He pulled Bing Tang and Ji Yun behind him to stop them from coming forward. He stroked his stomach and looked at Tian Jizi. Tian Jizi is an otherworldly expert. You boast that you can see through the mysteries of heaven. From the moment I didn't know you, your legend was no longer a secret. Back then, you gave your majesty, North Placating Marquis, and Wang Yi a fortune-telling. You said something about the Ziwei Emperor Star and the 3 inauspicious stars. At this point, Qin Yining sneered, and his eyes became sharp. If it weren't for this fortune-telling, why would your majesty fear Pang Zhishi to this extent? Why would we have so many twists and turns? You said I was a variable? What about you? Aren't you an evildoer who brings chaos to the world? You plan this and calculate that. Have you ever considered that your own existence is a threat to the common people? What a joke. Tian Jizi was so angry that his face turned red. He angrily pointed at Qin Yining and said, If it weren't for a variable like you, I would have already led the world's affairs onto the right path. But now, with the Ziwei Emperor Star by my side, the person who deserves to die didn't die, causing my game of chess to be messed up. Qin Yining's heart was beating wildly. With the Ziwei Emperor Star by my side, the person who deserves to die didn't die. Did that mean that Pang Xiao and Li Qiqian were still alive? Tian Jizi pointed at Qin Yining in exasperation. You should have died long ago. Your existence is the biggest variable in my game of chess. Qin Yining sneered. Back then, in the Fairy Lady Temple, you said that I had an extremely noble destiny. Now you're going back on your words? Do you remember how many of your words can be trusted? At that time, I saw that Duchess Ding was there. So, I had no choice but to speak nonsense. I calculated all the people in the world, but I couldn't see through you. You were clearly destined to die young, but you've always lived. If your mother hadn't been pregnant with you, your father wouldn't have tried to drive a wedge between Beiji and Pang Zhongjing. Pang Zhongjing's original destiny would have been completely changed, and he died an unnatural death. Pang Zhishi could have been a young marshal when he was born, but he wasted his time in the countryside until he was in his teens, causing the 7 kills star to rise to the top. And this time, it's all because of you. Pang Zhishi didn't have to go. You were born to be a variable. Only by killing, you can everything return to the right path. Tian Jizi gritted his teeth. He had lost control of his emotions due to his anger. He turned around and pulled out a knife from the man's waist. Then, he walked over murderously with Qin Yining. If I kill you today, I can set things right, and everything in the human world can return to the right path. If you die, you can't blame me. It's your fault for not living in this world. When Ji-Yun saw Tianjizi coming over with a knife, she pulled out her soft sword in a panic. Chapter 609. At that moment, time seemed to slow down in Qin Yining's eyes. Everything around her could no longer be seen clearly. She screamed and reached out to pull Ji-Yun back, but her body was heavy now, and her stomach was in the way. She could not save Ji-Yun as quickly as before, and could only watch as the sharp arrow headed straight for Ji-Yun. Ji-Yun could have dodged it. However, Qin Yining was behind her, so how could she dodge? Moreover, Tianjizi's blade was as white as snow, and it was about to reach her in the blink of an eye. Ji-Yun gritted her teeth, and her gaze suddenly turned cold. She did not retreat or give way. Instead, she flicked the soft sword in her hand, and the soft sword that was originally wrapped around her waist like a silver belt pierced straight towards Tianjizi's throat at this moment. Even if she had to exchange a life for a life, it was still a gain for her. Tianjizi did not expect Qin Yining to have such a loyal servant by his side. Seeing the tip of the sword coming towards her, she panicked and tried to dodge. However, Tianjizi did not know martial arts. She was so frightened that her heartbeat quickened, and she tried to retreat in a panic. Meanwhile, the arrow that was aimed at Ji-Yun was already in front of her. At the critical moment, a white figure suddenly appeared in front of her nimbly. He flicked away Ji-Yun's soft sword that was aimed at Tianjizi and waved his other hand in front of Ji-Yun. Under the vibration of his wide sleeves, the arrow that was like a hot knife through butter was deflected to the side. With a thud, the arrow buried itself in a thick tree, and half of the arrow's body was embedded in it. Young Master Mu. Qin Yining was pleasantly surprised and worried at the same time. He quickly pulled Ji-Yun to his side to protect her. Mu Jinghu restrained Ji-Yun, protected Tianjizi, and saved Ji-Yun. Qin Yining still could not see through his position. Ji-Yun had almost lost her life just now, and now she was so scared that her forehead was covered in cold sweat. Mu Jinghu turned around and greeted Tianjizi, "Martial uncle." Tianjizi was almost killed by Ji-Yun just now and was still in shock. She should be happy that she was saved, but Mu Jinghu also saved Ji-Yun. Her face darkened as she reprimanded, "Get out of the way. Martial uncle, why did you drug me? Why? Wasn't it because she was afraid that he would ruin things?" Tianjizi looked up and glared at Mu Jinghu. He gritted his teeth and said, "Get out of the way. Don't you understand?" Mu Jinghu stood rooted to the ground like a wooden stake. He lowered his head and said, "Uncle, please stop." Seeing that Mu Jinghu was still the same as before, Qin Yining heaved a sigh of relief. Even Ji-Yun and Bingtang were full of hope. Mu Jinghu's martial arts were unfathomable. As long as he was willing to help, Tianjizi would definitely not be able to do anything today. "Stop? What do you know?" Tianjizi was furious. His eyes were red as he roared. "Back then, Master taught you martial arts so that you could protect me. Why are you siding with an outsider now? Don't tell me you can't bear to take her life like that Liu guy. Or are you like Jian too? Is that Pang Xiao worth all of you protecting his wife? Martial uncle, Pang Zhishi is my friend. He once entrusted me to protect the Qin clan. I can't let you kill her. You..." Tianjizi glared at Mu Jinghu. His eyes were bloodshot. He gritted his teeth and said, "What if I must kill her? Are you going to betray your sect?" Mu Jinghu said helplessly, "Martial uncle, the Qin clan is just a woman. Why must you kill her? Moreover, she is pregnant now. Killing her is equivalent to killing 3 people. You are too cruel." "I'm cruel? You don't know anything. Don't meddle in our affairs." Tianjizi couldn't take it anymore. He pointed the knife at Mu Jinghu and said, "Get out of my way, martial uncle." Mu Jinghu lifted his robe and knelt on the wet ground. "Martial uncle, please don't kill anymore. Unfilial son, I'll kill you first." Tianjizi roared angrily. He raised the knife with both hands and slashed it at Mu Jinghu. Mu Jinghu knelt on the ground. He raised his hand and waved his sleeve. Tianjizi felt a strong gust of wind in front of him. Clang! There was a crisp sound of metal. The knife in Tianjizi's hand was broken at the base. Tianjizi only had the handle of the knife left in his hand. He was shaken and staggered 2 steps back before falling to the ground. The archer in the distance saw this and quickly drew his bow and shot an arrow at Qin Yining. Mu Jinghu stood up and unhurriedly waved the broken blade casually. The arrow was split into 2 halves and fell to the ground due to the loss of strength. The archer did not expect Mu Jinghu to have such a skill. He was furious and wanted to draw his bow again. However, a silver light flashed, and he felt a chill in his chest. He looked down and saw that Mu Jinghu's broken knife was stuck in his chest. Mu Jinghu stood in front of Qin Yining and the rest with his hands behind his back. He looked relaxed. The archer's eyes widened in horror. His tall body fell to the ground, and he twitched as he stopped breathing. At this moment, there was a rush of footsteps and the sound of horse hooves. 3 of the guards that Jiziyu had arranged for Qin Yining rushed over. Princess Consort. The 3 of them were injured. They held their knives and stood in front of Qin Yining. They looked at Tianjizi and Mu Jinghu warily. Qin Yining's eyes dimmed. He knew that the remaining 2 would not be able to come. Just like the archer who was driving the carriage, Tianjizi sat on the muddy ground and looked at Qin Yining's guards who had arrived. She then looked at Mu Jinghu, who was standing firmly in front of her. She suddenly threw away the knife in her hand and laughed loudly. Ha ha ha! It's really destiny, destiny! I've calculated everyone in the world, but you're the only one I can't predict. You're the variable. Everything around you is a variable. Since the heavens have given me this mission, why do they still allow you to exist? You should have died long ago. Tianjizi got up and pointed at Qin Yining. If you don't die, I don't know how long the world will be in chaos. Qin Yining frowned. He looked at Tianjizi's crazed appearance and felt a little sad. How many people in the world could turn metaphysics into a career? Whether Tianjizi's predictions were accurate or not was another matter. She had put in so much effort for this matter that Qin Yining didn't know whether to praise her persistence or despise her ignorance. Martial uncle, let's go. Mu Jinghu rubbed his aching temples and turned to look at Qin Yining. Qin Yining hurriedly bowed with Ji Yun and Bing Tang. Young Master Mu, thank you very much. Mu Jinghu shook his head and sighed. Don't hate my martial uncle. He's doing this for the world. As he spoke, he felt that his request was somewhat unreasonable. Qin Yining had almost been killed. Tianjizi had instigated him to harm her and Tayton. Now that she was pregnant and was being hunted down, how could he not hate him? Mu Jinghu cupped his hands in shame and turned to help Tianjizi up. Tianjizi climbed up shakily and slapped away Mu Jinghu's hand. She muttered, "Destiny, change, destiny, change." She walked away dejectedly. Mu Jinghu could only silently follow behind Tianjizi. Wang Fei, should we let her go? A guard bowed and asked. Qin Yining shook his head. With him here, you won't be able to kill her. He turned to look at the 3 injured people and said apologetically, I've implicated you. Wang Fei, don't blame yourself. We are the Marquis' guards. We swear to obey the Marquis' orders. The Marquis wants us to protect Wang Fei, so we will do our best to protect Wang Fei. Qin Yining wiped the rainwater off his face and said, Bury our brothers for now and make a mark. We will return to the city and make arrangements before coming back to find them. Yes. The 3 went to find the corpses of their brothers and buried them beside the forest to make a mark. The rest of the journey was extremely dull, but also very smooth. Qin Yining's carriage arrived at the gate of the Wangfu. The gatekeeper immediately ran inside, happily, to pass the message. There were also people who removed the door sills and helped to drive the carriage. When the Wangfu's guards saw the 3 guards, they knew that they must have experienced a tough battle on the road. They immediately turned pale with fright and frantically came to inquire about the situation. Qin Yining helped Bing Tang and Ji Yun off the carriage. The servants who came to hold the umbrella for her were also stunned when they saw that her clothes were soaked, her hair was disheveled, and her skirt was covered in mud. Qin Yining said, Quickly find a doctor to treat the three of them. Also, go find the location of the three brothers. Qin Huayan sprained his ankle, so it was inconvenient for him to rush out at this time. However, the Sun Clan and Madame Ma were together when they heard the news. At this time, they came over together. When they saw the situation of Qin Yining and the others, the two of them were shocked. The Sun Clan came forward and grabbed Qin Yining's hands. They rubbed his hands to warm her hands and asked, "Sister Yi, how did you become like this? What happened on the road?" "Madam, let the child change clothes and wash up first to avoid catching wind," Madame Ma said, and turned around to order people to prepare a sedan. Qin Yining smiled at Madame Ma and the Sun Clan to comfort them. "Don't worry, I'm fine. I'll go back and tidy up first. Let Bing Tang take a look at me. By the way, where's my father?" "Your father is in the room. His ankle is swollen like a steam bun." The Sun Clan looked at the three guards who were being helped down and asked worriedly, "Did something happen to you?" Qin Yining smiled and said, "It's okay. Mother, don't worry." At this time, a sturdy woman came over with a stretcher. Qin Yining sat on it with the help of Bing Tang and Ji Yun. The women carefully carried her to the veranda and went all the way to Sea Qing Garden. The Sun Clan and Madame Ma looked at each other. Both of their eyes were filled with worry. Something must have happened to this child. "Madame Ma, go and tell Grandfather Ma. I'll go and see how the girl is doing." The Sun Clan immediately nodded. The two of them walked away quickly. One went to Sea Qing Garden, while the other went to Sea Shui Garden. Qin Yining changed out of her wet clothes and used hot water to wipe her body. She also washed her hair. She ate soup to expel the cold and medicine to prevent miscarriage. Then she changed into casual clothes and sat on the Kong bed, wrapped in a blanket. Although it was not winter yet, when Qin Yining said it was cold, the servants immediately heated the Kong bed. It was not very hot, but it was still warm to sit on. Qin Yining sighed comfortably. She pulled Ji Yun and Bing Tang, who had also tidied up, to sit on the Kong bed. She also called Xian Yun and Lin Xiaozhou to sit beside her. "The best Kong bed in the north is this." "Yes, Princess Consort, do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" Xian Yun asked worriedly. Chapter 610. Bing Tang shook his head and said helplessly, "I'm not an elixir maker. How can I get better after eating it? We're already very lucky to be alive. Compared to losing our lives, a small cold is nothing." Qin Yining's words made them fall silent. Mrs. Ma came in with a bowl of brown sugar eggs. When she heard Qin Yining's words, she sighed and said, "Little E, did you really encounter danger on the road?" Bing Tang and Ji Yun hurriedly bowed to Mrs. Ma. Mrs. Ma smiled and handed the bowl to Qin Yining. "Drink it while it's hot to warm your body." She then asked, "Are you hurt? Are you feeling unwell?" "I did encounter a little trouble, but it was a close call." "Don't worry, Grandma." Qin Yining took the white porcelain bowl of soup from the lotus leaf with both hands, took a big sip, and sighed comfortably. Mrs. Ma sat sideways on the edge of the Kong bed and looked at Qin Yining with pity. When she thought of her grandson who was buried in the underground palace, and then looked at Qin Yining who was still smiling despite experiencing so much danger with a pale face and a pregnant belly, she almost burst into tears. "Good child, our family has wronged you." "Grandma, what are you talking about?" Qin Yining placed the bowl of soup on the low table and held Mrs. Ma's hand. "Grandma, don't think so much. A person's life is full of ups and downs. Just grit your teeth and get through it. Although I encountered danger, I'm fine now." She leaned closer to Mrs. Ma and said, "And I'm sure now that Wang Yi is fine." Mrs. Ma looked at Qin Yining in surprise and carefully observed her expression. She suspected that Qin Yining was deliberately saying that to comfort her. Qin Yining told Mrs. Ma about the encounter with Tianjizi on the road just now, minus the dangerous part. Tianjizi is a firm believer in divination. She planned everything, but because she failed the last step, she came to find trouble with me. It was because she calculated that your majesty was affected by Wang Yi and must not be dead. Wang Yi and your majesty are still in the underground palace. As long as we dig quickly, we'll be fine. Mrs. Ma was skeptical, but Qin Yining's eyes were so firm that Mrs. Ma believed him a little. "Lassie, are you serious?" "It's true." Chin Ening nodded heavily. "But that Tian Jizi did this kind of thing. Is he crazy? Who in their right mind would want to kill someone just to divine something? She didn't just kill one or two people. How many people have been killed in the Imperial Mausoleum? How many people were killed when the war broke out at the border?" Chin Ening was silent. After a while, he gritted his teeth and said, "Isn't she crazy?" At this moment, the sound of footsteps came from the courtyard. Chin Ening heard it and knew that Qin Huayuan and the Sun Clan had arrived. He hurriedly asked someone to help them. The door was opened. Qin Huayuan got off the pole and jumped in with the help of the Sun Clan. Mrs. Ma got up with a smile and gave up her seat. After thinking for a while, she held the Sun Clan's hand and said, "In-law, let's go to the kitchen and see what we can make for Lassie." The Sun Clan also knew that she didn't understand what was going on outside. Besides, she was most worried about Qin Ening's health now, so she went along with Mrs. Ma's words and said, "Sister, he hasn't eaten well in the past 3 days. I asked the kitchen to stew some black chicken soup. Let's go and see if there's anything else to nourish her body." Mrs. Ma and the Sun Clan went out with their people, leaving only Qin Huayuan, Qin Ening, Bing Tang, Ji Yun, Xian Yun, and Lien Xiaozhou in the room. Qin Huayuan asked, "What happened on the way here?" Qin Ening told Qin Huayuan in detail how they went down the mountain just now, who were the guards arranged by Jiziyu, what they experienced on the way, and what Tian Jizi and Mu Jinghu said to each other. Qin Huayuan put his sprained foot flat on the edge of the Kong bed and leaned back against the soft ink cushion. He lowered his eyes and listened carefully, gently tapping the table with his hand. After Qin Ening finished, Qin Huayuan said, "So, she calculated that your Majesty's life would be saved because of Wang Ye's presence. So she thought you were a variable and came to kill you?" "That's right." Qin Ening frowned and said, "I think Tian Jizi must be crazy. Who would take a fortune-telling so seriously and treat it as a golden rule? For the sake of the so-called righteous path, Tian Jizi is willing to do anything. This is simply absurd." Qin Huayuan said, "Actually, Tian Jizi is similar to many people who place great importance on their beliefs. For the things they believe in, they can give up everything. She thinks that everything she does is correct, so she naturally feels that all of our actions are in the way. But at least there is some good news. If her calculations were accurate, Wang Yi should still be alive." "Yes." Qin Ening couldn't help but smile. The depression he had felt over the past few days had dissipated because of this news. As long as Pang Xiao was alive, there was still hope for their future. Qin Huan thought for a moment and said, "This news hasn't been verified yet, so it's not appropriate to publicize it for the time being. Otherwise, it'll be hard for us to explain if someone asks." Qin Ening agreed and said, "Something happened to your Majesty, and now there are so many variables in the palace. The people who control power have just tasted the sweetness, so they definitely don't want anyone to stop them. If they knew that your Majesty was still alive, they would create rumors about Prince Li being in charge of the country, and even change the commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army. That would be a great disrespect to your Majesty." Others might not believe this news, but the people who control power would definitely say that the person who spread the rumor had ulterior motives. It's not appropriate for the Wang Mansion to have too many complications right now. As long as they know that Pang Xiao is still alive, they should dig up as soon as possible. It's good that you understand." Qin Huayuan saw that Qin Ening was so steady and said with relief, "I was worried that you would be swayed by your emotions after hearing the news about Wang Yi." Qin Ening couldn't help but laugh and say, "Father, you worry too much. I'm not a child. How can I not know what's important?" In Qin Huayuan's eyes, wasn't Qin Ening just a child? Qin Ening thought of Tian Jizi's words just now and said hesitantly, "Father, did you use the military stratagem against General Feng because my mother was pregnant with my child?" Qin Huayuan had expected that Qin Ening would have doubts. He smiled and said, "It's all in the past. At that time, your mother was pregnant with you. This matter wasn't Tian Jizi's fault. This was indeed one of the reasons, but it wasn't the whole story. So, The reason why Qin Huayuan used the stratagem against Beiji State back then was really because her mother was pregnant with her. Thinking that Pang Zhao's style of doing things outside changed because she was pregnant and tried her best to restrain herself, Qin Yining could roughly guess the situation at that time. At the very least, it was to allow her mother to give birth to her smoothly, right? Thinking of Pang Zhao's background, Qin Yining felt somewhat lucky. If Madame Pang hadn't been jealous and secretly sent Pang Zhao away when she found out that the Yao clan had become Pang Zhongjing's maidservant, and the Yao clan had Madame Ma, who was smart and didn't let her take the child back to the Pang family to buy a bright future. Instead, she let Pang Zhao grow up in the countryside. Perhaps even Pang Zhao couldn't escape when the family was confiscated and exterminated. Wait, Tian Jizi said that Pang Zhao was destined to be a young marshal. Could it be that Pang Zhongjing wouldn't have died if he didn't use the stratagem to sow discord? Could it be that he would eventually revolt against the tyranny of Beiji State? Thinking of this, Qin Yining couldn't help but tremble all over. If Pang Zhongjing didn't fall into the trap of sowing discord and Beiji State couldn't find a chance to kill him, he would have enough time to prepare. In the end, he would rise up and take Pang Zhao back to his side. Then, Pang Zhao would become the son of the rebel army's leader. After overthrowing Beiji State, even if the throne fell on Pang Zhongjing, it would be passed to Pang Zhao sooner or later. So, was this the real trajectory of history? If this was really the case, her existence was really a variable. Although she felt that Tian Jizi was a lunatic who was certain of destiny and crazily wanted everything to conform to her so-called destiny. But she couldn't help but admit that Tian Jizi's calculations were quite accurate. Qin Yining's heart turned 100 guesses in between breaths. Seeing her uncertain expression, Qin Huayuan knew that she was thinking about what happened in the past. So he changed the topic and said, I think one of the reasons why Prince Consort Ji is so diligent in digging up the evidence is probably because of his friendship with Wang Yi. The relationship between the ruler and his minister is secondary. Later, I'll send someone to the mountain to send a letter. If Prince Consort Ji knows about this, he will definitely urge that group of people not to slack off. Father, you also noticed? Qin Yining said, a friend in need is a friend indeed. Now that something has happened to our family, I realize that Ji Lan isn't what I originally thought. I think Wang Yi has a reason to trust him. Qin Huayuan smiled when he heard this. He called Jingzhou over and whispered something in his ear. Jingzhou accepted the order and immediately went out without hesitation. The atmosphere in the room was unprecedentedly relaxed since Pang Zhao's incident. Seeing that Qin Yining's complexion was quite good, Qin Huayuan said, Father originally thought that if we couldn't find anyone in the next few days, once the power of the imperial court was transferred to someone else, the speed of saving people would definitely be reduced. At that time, I'm afraid that Wang Yi really wouldn't have any hope of being saved. If something like that really happened, Father would take you back to your hometown, far away from the clamor of the imperial court. Now it seems that the heavens have opened their eyes. I thought too much and made a mistake in my calculations. If Wang Yi can be saved, that would be the best thing that could happen. Qin Yining couldn't help but sigh when he heard this. I was thinking the same thing as Father. Actually, when I was sitting on a mountain these days, I often thought about what to do in the future. If something really happens, the best place for us to go is to bring the people of the Wang estate with us. It's best for our family if we just stay in the countryside and be an ordinary citizen. While Jiziyu was busy organizing his subordinates to dig on the mountain, Jingzhou came to him. The two of them went to the side and whispered a few words. Jiziyu's tired face finally revealed the first smile he had seen in the past few days. Are these words true? My master and the Wang Fei speculated together. Although there is no conclusive evidence, it shouldn't be too far off. Your Majesty and Wang Yi must still be alive. Otherwise, the Tian Jizi wouldn't have been so flustered and exasperated as to try to kill the Wang Fei. Jingzhou gave Jiziyu a deep bow. Many thanks to the Marquis for arranging for his subordinates to protect the Wang Fei. Otherwise, the Wang Fei would have lost her life. When Jiziyu thought of his dead brothers, he also felt very uncomfortable. He only exchanged a few polite words with Jing Zhe before anxiously going back to urge them to continue digging. The faster they dug, the higher the chances of Peng Xiao being saved. Chapter 611. What did you say? The Empress Dowager's face turned pale. She grabbed the armrest of the beautiful couch in anger and said, "How could it be possible? They are all living people. How could they suddenly disappear? Don't try to fool me with this nonsense." Empress Dowager, please calm down. This servant really isn't lying. Lord Sun, Lord Li, and the other lords and their families really disappeared overnight. They're people, not birds. How can they all fly away? The Empress Dowager got up angrily and paced back and forth. After a while, she suddenly stopped and looked at the eunuch in horror. Who did you say was the one who went missing? His mind raced as he asked in horror. Are those missing the ones who surrendered to the Yin dynasty? The eunuch thought about it and turned pale. He trembled in horror and stammered, Empress Dowager. Yes. The Empress Dowager thought that she was sensitive to the matters of the imperial court. She just didn't have the chance to participate in it before. Now that she thought about it, she suddenly understood. The county king of Yin and his father-in-law, called Gu something. Are they all gone? Yes, Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager vaguely felt that there was a huge conspiracy behind it. She forced herself to calm down and said, Ask Prince Li to come to Xian Palace. Yes. The eunuch breathed a sigh of relief as if he had been pardoned. He stood up and bowed before leaving. The Empress Dowager said again, Ask Marquis Qingyang to come here as well. Yes. After the eunuch left, the Empress Dowager paced back and forth for a while in frustration. Her mind was filled with the matters of the imperial court. She didn't know when the Taitan would mobilize their troops. Now the ministers of the Yin dynasty had also mysteriously disappeared. She didn't know if Li Qitian was still alive after being buried in the underground palace. After these days, the Empress Dowager had been freed from the panic and fear when she first received the news. Li Qitian's existence was indeed a mountain that supported her prosperity, but she couldn't rely on others forever. If she wanted to ensure the glory of the family, she could only rely on Li Qitian. It was better to take this opportunity to let the Zhou family have the opportunity to seize power. After all, the Li family could only have the surname of Li. She loved and worried about her son. But now that things had come to this, she couldn't solve the problem even if she cried herself to death. Someone had to be in charge of such a large country. Could it be that waiting for the world to fall into chaos before she, the Empress Dowager, was willing to take action? The only thing lacking was that it was too difficult to manage a country, fight with the court officials, and pacify the internal affairs. The Empress Dowager's mind was in a mess. One moment, she was worried about Li Qitian, and the next moment, she was worried that the loss of more than half of the surrendered officials was a huge conspiracy. She was afraid that she could not cope with it. Not long after, a chamberlain came in from outside the door to reply. Replying to the Empress Dowager, Prince Li, Marquis Qingyang, and eldest Princess Anyang have arrived. Let them in. The Empress Dowager sat upright with her back straight, looking dignified and aloof. The three people entered the grand hall. Prince Li and the Marquis of Qingyang both performed a grand salute, saying, Greetings, Empress Dowager. Only Li Helan bent his knees and quickly walked towards the Empress Dowager. Imperial Mother, is there good news on the mountain? The Empress Dowager saw that Li Helan had come uninvited and acted so casually in front of Prince Li and the Marquis of Qingyang without showing any special respect. She was somewhat displeased and walked past Li Helan, saying to Prince Li and the Marquis of Qingyang, The two of you are excused. Please sit. Seeing the Empress Dowager's grave expression, Li Helan knew that he had encountered something bad. He hesitated and said, Imperial Mother has something to say to younger cousin and younger uncle. Daughter will take her leave for now. The Empress Dowager gave a long "in" and raised her hand to dismiss Li Helan. The Marquis of Qingyang observed the Empress Dowager's expression and saw that she was displeased. There must be something troubling her. He stood up and saluted. If the Empress Dowager has anything to say, as younger brother, I will not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. Princely saw the Marquis of Qingyang's display of loyalty and hurriedly stood up, saying, "The Marquis of Qingyang is right. Now that your Majesty's whereabouts are unknown, all the more reason for us to work together to overcome this difficult situation." The Empress Dowager nodded in satisfaction. "Sit down. I have just received a piece of news and am unable to think of what to do, so I'm telling you. The surrendered officials who came to the court on the Dian have suddenly disappeared along with their families overnight. Do you know of this matter?" The Marquis of Qingyang shook his head and looked at Princely beside him. Although Princely was supervising the state, the relationships in the court could not be figured out in a short period of time. The things he knew were things that had already been made public. Naturally, he did not know of this news. Seeing the two's blank expressions, the Empress Dowager sighed. "Previously, I heard the Emperor say that the County King of Yin and his father-in-law were originally imprisoned in the imperial prison, but they have disappeared. Now, the officials of the Yin dynasty have also disappeared. There must be something fishy about this. I would like to discuss this matter with you. What should we do about it?" The Marquis of Qingyang said, "Could it be that these people from the Yin dynasty have become disloyal? They can't have disappeared overnight. They must have taken advantage of the chaos in the court to sneak away." "I think so too. If these people have escaped, they must have some ulterior motive. That is why they have all fled together. Now that the County King of Yin has disappeared, could they be thinking of rebelling?" Princely heard the word rebelling. His heart skipped a beat when he heard the word rebelling. He had been stumbling around in his job as regent and had not even had a chance to gather power. Was he going to make a fuss about the Yin dynasty wanting to restore the state? The Taitan Rebellion had already occurred in the north. If another Yin dynasty appeared in the south, wouldn't a Zhou be attacked from both sides? The County King of Yin frowned deeply. The Marquis of Qingyang was even more worried than the County King of Yin. If the Yin dynasty really caused trouble, wouldn't he, the newly appointed commander of the Tiger Army, have to lead the army into battle? "Don't think like that, Empress Dowager. Everything has to be thought of in a positive direction. The people of the Yin dynasty have already been subdued. If the County King of Yin is willing to be a county king in our court, he must be someone who is afraid of death. Even if he escapes, he won't be able to cause much trouble. As for the surrendered officials of the Yin dynasty, I see that your Majesty has not given them any important positions. Their departure won't cause much trouble for us. We can just send people to the south to track them down." The Empress Dowager trusted her brother. Thinking about it carefully, she said, "If that's the case, then send people to track them down. Do it quietly and don't alert the enemy." "Yes, leave this matter to me, Empress Dowager." The Empress Dowager thought about it and said, "Also, send people to find out how many surrendered officials of the Yin dynasty were who escaped and who else is in the capital. Capture them all and interrogate them strictly. These people are most likely spies left in the capital by the Yin dynasty." Empress Dowager is wise. Among the civil officials of the Dian court, isn't the most capable one Pang Zhishi's father-in-law the Pang Zhishi? We don't know if he escaped or not, but we'll go investigate later. The Empress Dowager nodded. Thinking carefully, she felt that she had not overlooked anything and quietly relaxed. She put on a smile and said, "The court is in turmoil. This is the time when I need all of you to work together. You didn't disappoint me. In the future, when the emperor is rescued and the country is stable, I will not forget your good deeds." Marquis Qingyang cupped his hands. Many thanks for the Empress Dowager's promotion. Princely also followed suit and bowed. However, his heart was beating like a drum. If Li Qiqian was alive and saw that he was supervising the country, he didn't know what would happen to him. If that was the case, it would be better to let Li Qiqian sleep in the underground palace. Thinking of this, Commandery Prince Li made some arrangements for the excavation of Mount Chongshan. The two of them chatted with the Empress Dowager for a while. Most of the time, they were encouraging the Empress Dowager with words and painted a beautiful blueprint for the future of Dezhou. However, At this moment, a chamberlain scrambled in from outside and said in a shrill and panicked voice, "Empress Dowager, there is news from the north. The Minister of War, Official Wang, requests an audience." When the Empress Dowager heard this, she felt her hair stand on end. Could it be that the Titan had attacked? The Empress Dowager hurriedly said, "There's no need to be so cautious now. Please invite Official Wang to Sand Palace to see me." "Yes." The chamberlain turned around and ran. It was obvious how urgent the situation was. The Empress Dowager really couldn't stay calm at this time. First, Your Majesty was buried in Chongshan, and many of the important officials in the court were killed or injured. Then, the Yin dynasty's surrendered officials left. The Yuchi Yin must be up to something. Now, the thing they were most afraid of had happened. The Titan had actually started to attack. The Empress Dowager felt that she couldn't bear the pressure at all. "Empress Dowager, the Minister of War, Official Wang, has arrived," the chamberlain outside the hall announced, and a tall man around 40 years old quickly walked in. After seeing the Empress Dowager bow, Wang Ji did not waste any time and anxiously said, "Empress Dowager, the Titan Eugene Khan personally led the army and launched a surprise attack. Of the 4 passes in the north, Tianyu Pass, Tianlang Pass, and Tianshu Pass have already fallen. The Dragon Legion commander Kong Xiong has retreated to Heaven's Gate and sent an urgent letter asking for reinforcements." When the Empress Dowager heard this, her head buzzed. She felt dizzy and nearly fell to the ground. Kong Xiong was the Dragon Legion commander that Your Majesty personally chose, and he couldn't beat those Titan barbarians? When did this happen? How did the Titan break through 3 passes without any warning? "Empress Dowager, General Kong said that Eugene Khan launched a surprise attack and caught us off guard." The Empress Dowager thought about the positions of the 3 passes. After a long while, she let out a sigh of relief. "Don't panic. Heaven's Gate is a dangerous place, and the Dragon Legion army is not weak. If they retreat to Heaven's Gate, as long as our reinforcements arrive in time, it will be fine. Empress Dowager is right." Princely nodded and praised. Wang Ji said, "Empress Dowager and Princely, please make a decision quickly. Long delays have many dreams." The Empress Dowager slowly nodded and looked at Marquis Qingyang with trust. However, Marquis Qingyang felt the hairs on his back stand up. "Empress Dowager, if the Tiger Army goes to the north, what will happen around the capital?" Marquis Qingyang cupped his hands and said, "If someone dares to come around the capital, we won't be able to protect them." Chapter 6:12. Wang Ji's words were very straightforward, and everyone understood. If there was a day when they needed to use the troops around the capital to protect the capital, then wouldn't the Titans' iron hooves trample on the capital? Eugene Khan was a war god on the same level as Pang Xiao and Jiziyu. Without Pang Xiao and Jiziyu as commanders, the people in the capital would not be a match for the Titan. Princely lowered his head, not daring to let others see the emotions in his eyes. The Empress Dowager was slightly dissatisfied. She felt that Marquis Qingyang's words were degrading the Empress Dowager's Zhou family, and that he was not worthy of her promotion. Marquis Qingyang realized that he had misspoken. He suppressed the fear in his heart and said with his head held high, "I only said this for the safety of the Empress Dowager and the people. As for myself, of course I'm willing to go into battle. A general has to fight on the battlefield. Only by killing the enemy can one be carefree." The Empress Dowager's expression finally relaxed. She smiled and nodded. "It's good that you have such determination. Since that's the case, I'll leave the matter of Heaven's Gate to you and Sir Wang to discuss." Wang Ji cupped her hands and said loudly, "Yes, Empress Dowager." Marquis Qingyang's heart was beating like a drum, but he also bowed. "Yes, Empress Dowager." The Empress Dowager nodded. Now that the matter in the north was settled, she relaxed a little and a smile appeared on her face. Marquis Qingyang saw that the Empress Dowager's mood had improved, so he smiled and comforted her. "Don't worry, Empress Dowager. The Dragon Legion retreating to Heaven's Gate is definitely a temporary measure. It's just that the Titan came too suddenly, and they were not prepared. The Dragon Legion, led by Prince Consort Ji, has fought for many years and is an army that has experienced hundreds of battles. I believe that as long as they regroup, the Dragon Legion will be able to chase the Titan out of our territory. The Empress Dowager could not help but smile and nod. Her son-in-law's personality was not likable, and he was cold and did not know how to care for others. He often angered Anyang to the point that he came to the palace to complain. However, his ability to lead troops could not be ignored. She believed that he would be able to lead them out. The Dragon Legion were not useless people, and there was no reason for them to let the Titan enter Heaven's Gate so easily. The Empress Dowager felt more at ease. After all, Dezhou had only been established for 5 years. The soldiers who had conquered the world were still hot-blooded. If they were released, they would definitely howl and bite the enemy like hungry wolves. The Empress Dowager was confident in this aspect. The Minister of War, Wang Ji, cast a sidelong glance at the Marquis of Qingyang, almost unable to suppress the contempt in his heart. It seemed that he had still underestimated the Marquis of Qingyang, who said that he only knew how to indulge in debauchery. This person's bootlicking skills were not bad either. Thinking of your Majesty, whose life and death were still unknown, Wang Ji couldn't help but worry. Even if there was no turmoil in the court and your Majesty presided over the situation, such a dangerous situation would not be easily resolved. What's more, the Empress Dowager was a woman without any political sense and a weak and incompetent royal prince. These people were really crazy about power. Wang Ji had no interest in flattering the Empress Dowager, so she bowed and excused herself. Before leaving the hall, he didn't forget to call out to the Marquis of Qingyang. "Marquis, would you like to travel with me?" However, the Empress Dowager smiled and said, "Ijia still has matters to discuss with the Marquis of Qingyang." Wang Ji complied, bowed, and retreated. Seeing this, Prince Li also bowed and excused himself. The Empress Dowager nodded her head in a dignified manner. After the outsiders left, she called the Marquis of Qingyang to her with a serious expression. "De Yong, today, Ijia has given you all the power that can be given to you. You have to work hard and fight for Ijia's honor, as well as our Zhou family's honor. Although we normally live well, others say that the emperor is benevolent and filial, which is why our Zhou family is where it is today. Although Ijia also knows that the emperor is filial, how is our Zhou family lacking compared to anyone?" Hearing the Empress Dowager directly call him little, the Marquis of Qingyang also affectionately called out, "Jiejia." Sitting sideways next to the Empress Dowager, he solemnly vowed, "Your Majesty is indeed not unkind to our family and is sufficiently filial to Jiejia. However, I'm not just a decoration in the military. It's not that I don't have any ability and can only rely on your Majesty's face to act. Jiejia, don't worry this time. I will definitely think of a way to stabilize our country and won't let others say that Jiejia was biased in making me the commander of the Tiger Army." Hearing this, the Empress Dowager nodded her head in satisfaction. That is exactly what Ijia meant. You are Ijia's younger brother. Each of your actions represents Ijia. You have to work hard and let Ijia's face shine. "Jiejia, don't worry," the Marquis of Qingyang said with a clear laugh. "That Pang Zhishi is only being praised by outsiders. What ability can a young brat have? In the past, you and your brother didn't have a chance. Now that you have given me such a good opportunity, of course I will properly grasp it." The Empress Dowager nodded her head in satisfaction. However, at this time, a middle-ranking official suddenly came in from outside the hall. "Empress Dowager, Sir Wang of the Ministry of War requests an audience." "Didn't you just leave? What is it now?" The Empress Dowager's heart skipped a beat, and her face turned pale with fright. After calling Wang Ji in, she saw that Wang Ji's expression was even worse than before. "Empress Dowager, the Yongning Prefecture, Hangzhou Prefecture, and Jianyang Prefecture in the south have declared independence and are in agreement with Southern Yan. Southern Yan's Emperor Yuqi Shujia has abdicated and is supporting the former Yan dynasty's Emperor Yuqi Yan to regain the throne." At this point, Wang Ji's expression was ashen. she said with a trembling voice. Empress Dowager, the South is also in chaos. Those ministers who escaped from the Yin dynasty must have planned this beforehand. Now, they're bringing their families to seek refuge with their former emperor. The Empress Dowager's mind buzzed, and she could no longer maintain her composure. The matters in the north had not been resolved, and the south was also in chaos. Could it be that the Taitan and the Yin dynasty had made an agreement? The Empress Dowager looked at Wang Ji for help, and then looked at her trusted younger brother. She anxiously said, "What should we do?" The Marquis of Qingyang's expression was even worse than the Empress Dowager's. He had a headache when he thought about mobilizing troops against the Taitan. He didn't expect the Yin dynasty to be reinstated. If the two sides attacked him, what should he do? Don't worry, Empress Dowager. The South will not be able to do anything. The Yuqi Yin are cowards. Even if the three prefectures near southern Yin cooperate with them, a small place like southern Yin is nothing to be afraid of. Marquis Qingyang said in a clear voice, "I feel that the greatest danger of southern Yin is not in war, but in people's hearts." People's hearts? The Empress Dowager calmed down a little. Marquis Qingyang said, "Empress Dowager, the ministers that escaped from the Yin dynasty must have returned to the Yuqi Yin. There are still many of them who haven't left. These people are in the capital and might be trying to get information from us." When the Empress Dowager heard this, she slapped her thigh. "Isn't that right? Go, investigate the remnants of the Yin dynasty. Capture them all and interrogate them. You must interrogate them and find out what the Yin dynasty is trying to do." Yes, Marquis Qingyang accepted the order. Wang Ji looked at Marquis Qingyang and despised him even more. Be it Pang Xiao or Jiziyu, he was willing to accept them as the commander of the Tiger Army. However, Wang Ji hated people like Marquis Qingyang who only knew how to suck up and not be of use at the crucial moment. However, the Empress Dowager's intention to take power was so obvious. With his position, he could not change the decision of the higher-ups. Wang Ji only hoped that your majesty could be saved. If the emperor could not be saved, and there was no one in the imperial court who could take up the responsibility to turn the tide, the great Zhou dynasty would be in danger. With such two huge things happening in the imperial court, it was impossible to hide it. The Dragon Legion Corps in the north lost 3 passes and retreated to Heaven's Gate to wait for reinforcements. The Yin dynasty in the south revived, and the 3 prefectures in southern Yin supported the Yuqi Yin to regain their position. Once the south acted, the Zhou would be attacked from 2 sides. When Qin Yining and his father heard this news, they were both silent. For the Yin dynasty to disappear in one night, they must have discussed this beforehand. However, as the head of the Yin dynasty, they did not reveal anything to Qin Huaiyun. He did not know that the Yuqi Yin had escaped. He also did not know that the surrendered officials had returned. Qin Huaiyun's heart was filled with mixed feelings after being marginalized and concealed like this. Qin Yining consoled Qin Huaiyun. "Father, it is good that we did not tell you about this. If they really found you, you would have to make a choice. Wouldn't that be a problem? It is better this way. You are no longer an official, and our family just wants to live together freely. It does not matter if they find us or not. Don't you think so?" Qin Huaiyun smiled and nodded. "You are right. Right now, all I want is for Zhishi to return home safely and for you to give birth to Lin. I do not care about the chaos in the court. In the future, when I am old, I might want to return home and take a look. Or I might even live there. After all, our family's manor was in the south. As for the rest, I do not care." Qin Yining saw that Qin Huaiyun was sincere and was not trying to comfort her. Only then did she relax. "Princess." Qin Yun's slightly anxious voice came from the door. A group of people came from outside the manor. The leader is a middle-ranking official. He said that he wants to invite the old master out. He has something to ask. Qin Yining and Qin Huaiyun looked at each other, and they both had their own thoughts. Qin Yining said, "Did I hear where these people came from? Are they from Yangxin Palace Hall or Xi'an Palace?" "I do not know. However, the middle-ranking official also brought the Jinwu guards from the palace. It seems that they did not come with good intentions." Qin Huaiyun said, "It must be because of the Southern Yin incident. Not all of the surrendered officials from the Yin dynasty left. Those people were probably arrested and detained. Qin Yining stood up and slammed the table. They have a good idea. They want to arrest people in my manor? Let's see if they have the ability. Qin Yining was burning with anger, and he ordered, "Gather all the Jinghu Wei. Accompany me outside to take a look. I want to see what they're going to ask my father." Xianyan nodded and quickly went to give the order. Ji Yun and Bing Tang helped Qin Yining change into outdoor shoes. Worried that she would catch a cold after the rain, they also took out a lotus-colored Ru-Yi jacket and put on her shoulders. Qin Huayan stood up helplessly and ordered someone to support him. "Father will go with you. Don't be too angry. It is not good for your health. Father will tell them when the time comes." Chapter 613. The swelling on Qin Huayuan's foot had subsided a bit, but she still walked with a slight limp. Qin Yining was worried that Qin Huayuan's foot injury was serious, so she ordered someone to prepare a stretcher for Qin Huayuan. She sat on the other stretcher and was carried to the front of the fu by a sturdy, older female servant. Xiaoyu and Su Weiji were already waiting at the e-gate. Both of their faces were filled with anxiety, and their brows were tightly knitted together. Ever since Pang Xiao went to MT Chuang, he hadn't returned. The two were so anxious that their hair had turned white. Now that they saw someone blocking their door, it was clear that they were bullying them because Wang Yu wasn't home. The two wanted nothing more than to raise their swords and fight to the death with the people outside. Seeing Qin Yining and Qin Huayuan come out, the two came forward to greet them. Qin Yining got off the stretcher and nodded to Xiaoyu and Su Weiji. "Thank you, Sir Su. Princess Consort." The people outside should have been arranged by the Empress Dowager. Although the one who spoke was a mid-ranking official, the Marquis of Qingyang was also among them. "You have to be careful not to hurt yourself." Qin Yining nodded and smiled as she comforted the two loyal and devoted elders. "Don't worry, I know what to do. I definitely won't hurt myself." Qin Yining had arranged for Jinghu Wei to go to the mountains, so there were only a dozen or so people left at home. However, with the addition of Jing Zhe and the others, as well as the ordinary bodyguards, although there weren't many people, their fighting strength wasn't weak. Qin Yining said, "Open the side door. Tell them that I'm here to ask about their situation." "Yes." The doorman opened the side door and said to the people outside, "Our princess consort has arrived. If you have any questions, you can ask them now." Qin Yining supported a servant girl to the door. As soon as she raised her eyes, she saw a greasy round face and a pair of malicious eyes sizing her up. This was the Marquis of Qingyang, the Empress Dowager's youngest brother, Zhou Daon. Qin Yining held his waist as he descended the red steps. He smiled and said, "It was the Marquis of Qingyang who came in person? Just now, I heard that the person who asked the question was a middle-ranking official. I thought that there was something else in the palace that needed to be instructed. Since the Marquis of Qingyang has personally come, we should all enter the manor to have a cup of tea. Would the Marquis do us the honor?" The Marquis of Qingyang narrowed his eyes as he watched Qin Yining. His eyes were filled with admiration and envy. Even though the woman in front of him was pregnant and had a swollen figure, it did not conceal her charm. That guy with the surname, she really had luck with women. "Your Highness, you're too polite." Marquis Qingyang coughed, then looked sternly at Qin Huayuan behind her. "We have come under orders to ask Sir Qin to make a trip." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved at the people behind him. The Jinwu guards behind him immediately went forward to apprehend him. Qin Yining stood at the very front, unwilling to back down. Jing Zhe and the other people beside her, as well as the Jinghu Wei guards, had already formed a semicircle around Qin Huayuan to protect him. They tightly surrounded the front of the manor. "Wait," Qin Yining sneered. "You have come under the Empress Dowager's orders. What proof do you have? My father has already retired from his post and has not even taken half a step out of the manor. What could he know? Moreover, this is the Prince Zhongshuan's manor. Wang Yi and your majesty are still buried in the underground palace. You don't want to save them, but instead come to the manor to bully Wang Ye's family. What are your intentions?" Apparently not expecting Qin Yining to be so eloquent, the Marquis of Qingyang was momentarily stunned. Qin Yining did not give him a chance to speak. My father is no longer an official of the imperial court. If you want to invite someone, you have to give me a reason. Even if it is the Empress Dowager's orders, I will only believe it if the Empress Dowager sends an imperial edict. Otherwise, I will suspect that you are Taytan spies who came specifically to sow discord between a meritorious official and your majesty. You woman. The Marquis of Qingyang came back to his senses and pointed at Qin Yining. You ungrateful thing. Your father is a traitor. The Empress Dowager is already giving him face by having this Marquis bring the Jinwu guards to arrest you. If you dare to disobey, then try it. Hearing the Marquis of Qingyang's crude words, the people of the manor all frowned. Jingzhe, Dahan, and the others were already so angry that their brows were furrowed and the swords in their hands were half drawn. Jinghui mixed in with the manor soldiers, each of them so angry that their faces were flushed red. Qin Huayuan came forward and coldly swept his eyes over the Marquis of Qingyang. Marquis of Qingyang, for better or worse, you come from a prestigious family and bring the Empress Dowager's face outside. How can you speak so rudely? If I have committed any crime, you could just bring the evidence to arrest me. In short, if you want to bring me over without knowing the reason, I will definitely not agree. The imperial court is currently in troubled times, yet you bring people to block the door of a meritorious official to arrest him. Are you not afraid that the other officials will be bitterly disappointed if they find out? Qin Huayuan had served in the imperial court for many years, so his aura was naturally not something a normal person could compare to. He knew how to speak and what tone to use to create a deterrent effect. He only spoke calmly, but in the ears of the Marquis of Qingyang and the others, it had a different effect. The Marquis of Qingyang's face was completely red. He was the Empress Dowager's younger brother, who didn't give him face outside. He didn't expect to stumble here. Moreover, he stumbled in front of a civil official who had already been removed from his position. The Marquis of Qingyang almost lost face. If he didn't perform well today, how would he establish his prestige in the future? Less nonsense. The Marquis of Qingyang roared. He turned around and ordered the Jinwu guard behind him. Arrest them. Whoever resists will be arrested as well. Hurry up. Yes. The Jinwu guards behind him responded. One of the leaders said hesitantly, Marquis, the Prince Zhongshan's consort is also. Are you stupid? The Marquis of Qingyang fiercely glared at that person. The Jinwu guards were all chosen from noble sons. With their status, they were existences that others would have to bow their heads and bend their backs when they went out. Now that they were being reprimanded by the Marquis of Qingyang, all of them felt very indignant. However, the Empress Dowager had ordered them, and they had no other choice. Everyone rushed forward to arrest Qin Huayuan, but everyone tacitly circled around Qin Yining. They even stayed far away from her for fear of bumping into her. How could Qin Yining be willing to watch his father be arrested? He immediately anxiously ordered the guards to escort Qin Huayuan into the estate. The Jinwu guards immediately became anxious when they saw that Qin Huayuan was about to be escorted into the estate. Although they obeyed orders to capture Qin Huayuan, they didn't have the guts to barge into the estate of the war god Wang Yi. Thus, they took advantage of the fact that Qin Huayuan was still there. Before she entered the estate, they mustered all their strength to capture her, so they were a bit heavy-handed. The Jinghu guards were completely anxious when they saw this. They rolled up their sleeves and were about to fight with their lives on the line. An uncontrollable dispute was on the verge of erupting. However, at this moment, they suddenly heard a burst of hurried footsteps rapidly approaching. A group of about 50 people wearing bright red battle clothes suddenly cut across, driving the Marquis of Qingyang and the Jinwu guards he brought over one zhang away. The leader said in a deep voice, "We are here to protect the estate under the orders of the Marquis of North Placating. No one is allowed to act impudently in the estate." Chapter 614. If the Empress Dowager wanted to arrest someone, why didn't she issue a decree? As a relative of the Empress Dowager, Marquis Qingyang shouldn't forget the lessons of history and do things that shouldn't be done. Qin Yining was grateful for Ji Ziyu's arrangements. His men had arrived in such a timely manner because of Ji Ziyu's careful arrangements. Now that she had a helper, she was even more confident. Marquis Qingyang's face was ashen from anger. He brandished his fists and rushed forward, wanting to punch and kick Qin Yining. Qin Yining inwardly mocked him for being an idiot. He just looked at Marquis Qingyang coldly and mockingly. The people around him had already rushed forward. Jinghu Wei's men protected Qin Yining behind them. Ji Ziyu's men were even more swift and decisive. They rushed forward and restrained Marquis Qingyang's arms behind his back. Marquis Qingyang's cheeks were pressed against the ground. His face was red as he struggled. "Let go, you bunch of daring fanatics. I'll have the Empress Dowager chop off your dog heads. Let go." Ji Ziyu's trusted men didn't seem to be afraid at all. Instead, they pressed the Marquis to the ground even harder, not giving Marquis Qingyang the slightest chance to attack. The Jinghu guards behind Marquis Qingyang looked at each other in dismay. They didn't know if they should come forward to rescue him. They could see that the people in front of them were all from the border army. It wouldn't be difficult for each of them to fight against 10 people. The Jinghu guards were like tigers in a cage. They would suffer when faced with a wild wolf that roared with all its might. Qin Yining saw that Ji Ziyu's men acted in the same way as Jinghu Wei and had an idea. He smiled at the leader and said, "This general, let him go. Marquis Qingyang is a proud and precious man. I'm afraid he won't be able to endure." Using the words proud and precious man to describe the current commander of the Tiger Army was already a great irony. Jinghu Wei and the others beside him burst into laughter. The leader smiled and waved his hand, instructing his men to release Marquis Qingyang. He then cupped his hands in greeting to Qin Yining. "This humble one is Lin Hongyu." After introducing himself, he turned around and said to Marquis Qingyang, who was struggling to get up, "My Marquis Dingbei has ordered us to protect the safety of Prince Zhongshuan's residence. Regardless of whether Marquis Qingyang is acting out of selfishness or for other reasons, please return." "Sure, I think you're trying to rebel." The Marquis of Qingyang wiped the dust from his face and pointed at Qin Yining, but he did not dare to continue forward. Ji Ziyu himself was a lunatic, and his subordinates were also crazy enough to not even care about the Empress Dowager. He was worried that this group of boors would directly kill him. When that time came, he would already be dead. Even if he had the Empress Dowager's support, it would be useless. Lin Hongyu was a veteran of the battlefield and had seen many different kinds of people. Seeing the expression on the Marquis of Qingyang's face, he knew that this person had definitely admitted defeat. While mocking him in his heart, he also quietly breathed a sigh of relief. If the Marquis of Qingyang was a forceful person, they would probably have to fight to the death. Now, it was even better to scare them off like this and save them a lot of trouble. Everyone turned a deaf ear to the Marquis of Qingyang's clamor. Seeing this, Qin Yining also felt that there was no point in arguing with the Marquis of Qingyang. So he ordered, "Return to the residence," and closed the door. The 50 or so imperial bodyguards and soldiers that Lin Hongyu had brought with him complied and followed the Jinghu Wei's people into the residence. Being ignored like this, the Marquis of Qingyang was so angry that he stomped his feet. However, he did not have the courage to challenge Ji Ziyu's people. Seeing the doors of the residence being closed, the Marquis of Qingyang coldly snorted, "Return to the palace. I want to see the Empress Dowager." The eunuchs and Jinghu guards who had come with him looked at the Marquis of Qingyang like they were looking at a coward who had fled in the face of battle. Outside the door, the bodyguards were certain that the Jinghu guards had left before letting out a sigh of relief. Qin Yining led his men to forcefully drive away the intruders. However, the Marquis of Qingyang must have gone to complain to the Empress Dowager. She was worried that the Empress Dowager would harm her father and became somewhat worried. At this time, Qin Huaiyuan had already thanked Lin Hongyu and the others. He sighed and said, "A friend in need is a friend indeed. We will always remember Marquis Dingbei's kindness." Lin Hongyu hurriedly smiled and bowed, saying, "Old Sir Qin, there is no need for this. To tell you the truth, The day after the incident on the mountain, Marquis Dingbei had arranged for us to be near the residence. The Marquis was worried that someone would take advantage of the situation and harm the residents. As a result, we ran into the Marquis of Qingyang's people today. Qin Yining and Qin Huayuan looked at each other in surprise. They did not expect that Ji Ziyu, who looked so cold, would actually be so meticulous in his actions. Although the residents had already been set up, but the people that Ji Ziyu had arranged were truly of great help. Not only did they provide protection, but they also shouldered all the blame. Qin Yining made up his mind, thinking that he must properly thank Ji Ziyu when he returned. As for the Marquis of Qingyang, he wanted to return to the palace and complain to the Empress Dowager, but he was stopped halfway by the Minister of War, Wang Zhi. Wang Zhi originally looked down on people like the Marquis of Qingyang, so she told the Marquis of Qingyang about the war, wanting to see the Marquis of Qingyang's cowardice. The Marquis of Qingyang did not disappoint Wang Zhi. He was so scared that his face turned pale and bloodless, and his lips trembled. The Taitan people were so fierce and cruel that the Marquis of Qingyang was afraid that he would be caught and eaten. He also promised the Empress Dowager that he would increase the number of troops at Heaven's Gate. But looking at it now, if he did not go up against the Taitan Eugene Han, what else could it be other than throwing his life away? The Marquis of Qingyang was very satisfied with his current life of luxury and did not want to throw his life away for such a thing. Therefore, after parting ways with Wang Zhi, the Marquis of Qingyang cleverly thought of a way to solve the problem. Present in Sai and Palace, the Empress Dowager was waiting for news, but what she received was an eunuch who came to reply. Replying to the Empress Dowager, the Marquis of Qingyang went to Prince Zhongshuan's residence today to capture Qin Ming. In the end, he was angered by the Prince Zhongshuan's consort. He originally wanted to forcefully capture her, but the guards arranged by Prince Consort Ji were very tough and actually injured the Marquis of Qingyang. At this time, the Marquis is so angry that he has a headache. He can't even stand properly and has already returned to the Marquis's residence to rest. The Marquis said to ask the Empress Dowager to calm down. When he is better, he will immediately go to the Prince Zhongshuan's residence. The eunuch learned the truth from the Marquis of Qingyang's words and then lowered his head in silence. The Empress Dowager was so angry that the veins on her forehead were popping out. Ji Ziyu's people were actually arranged to go to the Prince Zhongshuan's residence. Ji Ziyu was clearly treating her as an outsider and distancing herself from them. She was the Empress Dowager, and no one listened to the Empress Dowager's verbal orders. Could it be that the world was going to rebel? Good. Ijia will wait. Tomorrow, when the Marquis of Qingyang enters the palace, I will immediately have him capture Qin Ming. The Empress Dowager was sulking when she fell asleep that night. As a result, something even angrier came the next day. The Marquis of Qingyang's heart was attacked by anger and is seriously ill in bed. It must be inconvenient for him to go out. The Marquis of Qingyang also said that the Taitan War in the north is critical and the Tiger Army urgently needs to reinforce the north. He hopes that the Empress Dowager can find a suitable candidate as soon as possible. The steward of the Prince Zhongshuan left after replying. The Empress Dowager's face was ashen with anger. If it wasn't for the fact that she wanted to maintain her composure next to the Regent Princely, she probably would have already started cursing. Chapter 615. The Empress Dowager's expression was extremely unsightly. Prince Li was Li Qitian's younger cousin, and the Marquis of Qingyang was her younger brother. The Empress Dowager felt she had lost face for her maternal family to perform so poorly in front of her husband's family. Prince Li still had his gentle and timid appearance. His eyes were half closed, and he softly explained, "Empress Dowager doesn't need to worry. The Marquis of Qingyang is a hero on the battlefield. His temperament has always been like a raging fire. How could he endure encountering such a scoundrel who is good at talking? It's possible to fall ill from anger." The Empress Dowager felt that the Marquis of Qingyang's current actions were suspicious of shirking responsibility. But in front of Prince Li, she still had to take care of her face. The Empress Dowager was very satisfied that Prince Li was so tactful. She felt that it was a wise choice for her to choose Prince Li to be the regent of the state. Prince Li's temperament was weak, and he was a puppet that was easy to control, and she handed over the tiger army to her own family. This way, the state and military power were firmly in her hands. If the emperor was unharmed, then that would be good. When he returned, she would naturally hand over power. But if something happened to the emperor, she wouldn't be too passive. All power would be in her hands, or at least she wouldn't be controlled by the ministers of the court. The Empress Dowager thought of her recent decisions and couldn't help but be immensely pleased with herself. She found Prince Li even more pleasing to the eye. I didn't misjudge you. You really are a virtuous talent who knows when to advance and when to retreat. Prince Li was flattered by the praise and quickly stood up to return the courtesy. The Empress Dowager praises me too much. I don't have your Majesty's talents. Right now, I'm only following the Empress Dowager's orders and doing what I can. I don't have any other talents, but I'm obedient. The Empress Dowager thought to herself, it's good that you're obedient. But on the surface, she smiled and praised Prince Li again. She kept Prince Li for lunch and rewarded him with snacks and fruit before letting him leave. Prince Li left Sun Palace and took a small sedan chair out of the palace without any obstructions. Arriving at the palace gates, he boarded his own carriage and returned to his residence in the capital. As soon as he entered the main entrance, he saw a middle-aged scholar wearing a blue robe and a square headscarf on his head. The scholar greeted him with a smile. He was Prince Li's advisor. His name was Dai Chun, and his courtesy name was Ji Nan. Wang Yi. Dai Chun came forward and bowed. Mr. Dai. Prince Li smiled gently. Mr. Dai, why are you standing here? I'm waiting for the Duke's return. Oh, is there something you need, sir? Exactly. Prince Li smiled and said, why don't we move to the study to talk? Dai Chun smiled and nodded. This student has the same intention. When the two of them arrived at the study, Prince Li dismissed the servants. He then lifted the hem of his robe and casually sat down on a round-backed chair. His expression naturally carried a bit of arrogance. Compared to when he was in front of the Empress Dowager, he was like a completely different person. Dai Chun stood below and cupped his hands in greeting. Did you gain anything from your trip to the palace today? When Prince Li heard this, he actually burst out laughing. Thinking of how the Empress Dowager had clearly been angered to the point of fainting by the Marquis of Qingyang, yet she still had to pretend to be calm and find a way out for herself. Prince Li laughed even more heartily and loudly. Seeing this, Dai Chun could already somewhat guess the situation. Allow this student to guess. Could it be that the Marquis of Qingyang has caused some trouble again? That's right. Prince Li smiled and shook his head, praising. Sir's plan at the time was truly good. Regardless of whether it was the Marquis of Qingyang or that old man vainly trying to seize power, they were both equally stupid. One overestimated his abilities, while the other treated everyone in his family as a treasure. At the time, listening to Sir's words and recommending the Marquis of Qingyang to the Empress Dowager as the commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army was truly killing several birds with one stone. Dai Chun smiled and shook his head. The Duke is too kind. The original idea wasn't a student's, but the Duke's own foresight. Currently, the Dragon Stallion army is urgently waiting for rescue at Heaven's Gate, but the Marquis of Qingyang is suddenly afraid. If this news spreads, not only will he lose face, but even the Empress Dowager will be angered. At that time, you can take advantage of the fact that everyone is looking down on the Marquis of Qingyang's desertion to personally take over this authority. That would be perfectly justified. Prince Li put away the smile on his face, shaking his head. This idea is very good. I also feel that it's feasible. However, I'm afraid that a long dream will bring many changes. That old woman, the Empress Dowager, is greedy in her heart. It's not like she only has one idiotic younger brother. There are still so many nephews with the surname Zhou. I'm afraid that when the time comes, this authority still won't belong to me. Prince Li stood up, pacing to the window with his hands behind his back. Now is the perfect opportunity to gain a firm foothold. If your majesty is truly found, the authority in my hands will still not be stable. At that time, I might have to face your majesty's reckoning. I know your majesty's personality better than anyone else. Dai Chun also said seriously, the duke doesn't need to worry. Although Prince Consort Ji's men are keeping a tight watch on Mount Zhuangshan, doesn't a tiger also have times when it takes a nap? We just need to keep an eye on that place. If we discover someone who shouldn't have appeared, we can just order people to take care of them. We definitely can't let your efforts go to waste because of this. Commander Princely nodded and said, in my opinion, it's better to burn down the mountain. Duke, burning the mountain is not appropriate. There's still so many people that Prince Consort Ji brought to dig it up. If this Mount Zhuangshan is wiped out, the people outside will inevitably criticize this as someone setting the fire to murder your majesty. How can this be considered murder? Who knows if he's still alive or not? Perhaps this isn't murder, but rather helping to cremate him. Dai Chun said with a smile, Wang Yi is right. However, we still need to be cautious right now. Right now, we can't let the Empress Dowager become suspicious. When you can stabilize your position as Prince Regent, there will be many things we can do. Princely nodded. His hands supported the armrests on both sides of the chair as he let out a long breath. He said carefreely, Li Qiqian and I are brothers of the same clan. There's no reason why I can't be the emperor if he can. How much worse am I compared to him? This throne is surnamed Li, but the Empress Dowager wants to get it into the hands of someone surnamed Zhou? She's really overestimating herself. Dai Chun nodded in agreement. Princely outlined his future in his mind, and his smile became even more confident. If the Empress Dowager saw this appearance of Princely, she probably wouldn't be at ease handing over the regent power to him. However, Princely hit it too deeply in front of outsiders. Marquis Qingyang claimed to be ill and didn't attend court. The Empress Dowager was angry and sent people to visit the Marquis Fu for 3 consecutive days. But Marquis Qingyang was still bedridden. The Empress Dowager was so angry that she personally left the palace to see Marquis Qingyang, who knew that Marquis Qingyang said something to the Empress Dowager. When the Empress Dowager returned, she called for the Minister of War, Wang Ji. Right now, Marquis Qingyang's health isn't any better. Chapter 6:16. Wang Ji saw that the Empress Dowager was going back on her words. When she made such a request, she felt that it was not worth it for Ji Ziyu. If she knew that Marquis Qingyang was useless, the Empress Dowager would have focused all her efforts on her family. Not only did this hurt Ji Ziyu, but it also hurt the Empress Dowager. It also made the other officials feel sorry for the loss of the rabbit. That was why the court could not be controlled by this ignorant woman. If this continued, it would be chaotic sooner or later. Wang Ji suppressed the dissatisfaction in her heart and said helplessly, the Empress Dowager is wise. However, Prince Consort Ji is stubborn and may not agree. The Empress Dowager glared. He dares. Does he want to rebel? Wang Ji lowered her head in silence. Everyone knew what Ji Ziyu's personality was like. There was no need to explain it in detail. After the Empress Dowager lost her temper, she thought about how Ji Ziyu didn't even pay attention to the current dynasty's Princess Royal and how he didn't even know how to curry favor with such a noble mother-in-law. She couldn't help but feel a splitting headache. Why did this kind of latrine stone have to be her son-in-law? Just go. If he has any objections, tell him to come find Aijia. Wang Ji said in a low voice, yes. Then, she helplessly went to MT Chuang. However, just as Wang Ji expected, Ji Ziyu only touched the dust on his face after hearing Wang Ji's words. I'll have to trouble official Wang to tell the Empress Dowager that I won't do it. He turned around and picked up a shovel and continued to dig. Wang Ji looked at the people digging up the mountain in full swing. She realized that there was no one from the Imperial Guards among them. Looking at their attire, they were all Ji Ziyu's men. Her heart couldn't help but skip a beat. Suppressing the strange feeling in her lower body, Wang Ji had no choice but to move closer to Ji Ziyu. She earnestly advised Ji Ziyu, who was waving his shovel, Prince Consort Ji, for the sake of the country, for the sake of the common people, you can't just let go. The Tiger Army's 100,000 soldiers are now without a leader. The Dragon Stallion Army has retreated to Heaven's Gate and is anxiously waiting for Sung Bing's help. Jiziu's hands did not stop moving as he said, I am no longer the commander of the Tiger Army. Isn't the current commander of the Tiger Army Marquis Qingyang? The Empress Dowager can instruct the Marquis of Qingyang to go. The Marquis of Qingyang fell ill. We can't go to war. Is that so? Jiziu said faintly as he dug out another shovel of soil. Wang Ji understood Jiziu's anger and said helplessly, I understand that Prince Consort Ji is upset, but, Lord Wang, you must be joking. My heart is not unsettled. Right now, I just want to save your majesty. I don't want to think about anything else. I have listened to the Empress Dowager's verbal order once. Now, I am no longer an official. I am just a small marquis, an unremarkable son-in-law. I know that I'm not capable enough to take on a role of the Tiger Army's commander-in-chief. You're the one who's joking. With your talent, if you can't be the commander of the Tiger Army, who else can? The Marquis of Qingyang can. Jiziu stabbed the shovel into the ground and turned around. I know what Lord Wang means, but I really have no interest in this matter. Lord Wang, please go back to the Empress Dowager. There are many talented people in the Empress Dowager's family. If the Marquis of Qingyang can't do it, isn't there someone else? Even a clay figurine has a clay figurine, not to mention Jiziu. Although he was taciturn and cold, as if he didn't care about anything, the Empress Dowager's actions were too hurtful. At this time, if Jiziu saw that power had been placed in front of him and reached out to take it, it would be different from how he usually did things. Moreover, he hasn't given up on saving your majesty. He's loyally guarding the last hope. Even if he only has the Fu soldiers by his side, he's still digging. Wang Ji admired such a loyal person. Wang Ji didn't continue to persuade him. She only greeted Jiziu and thanked him for his hard work, then went back to report to the Empress Dowager. As for Jiziu, he put aside the trivial matters and continued to dig. He led his men and worked tirelessly to dig. So many days had passed. He didn't know if the people buried underground were still alive, but as long as there was a glimmer of hope, he couldn't give up. If he was alive, he wanted to see him. If he was dead, he wanted to see the corpse. If he gave up even then, it was even more impossible for Qin Yining, who was just a woman, to organize people to save people. When the time came, wouldn't they completely leave the people underground to fend for themselves? When the Empress Dowager learned that Jiziu still refused to be the commander of the Tiger Army, she was so angry that she smashed her teacup on the spot. Just as Li Helan entered the palace, the Empress Dowager couldn't vent her anger. The Empress Dowager had nowhere to vent her anger. She grabbed Li Helan and scolded her harshly. First, she said that Li Helan couldn't win the Emperor's son-in-law's heart. Then, she reprimanded Li Helan for acting so absurdly that Jiziu was deeply hurt. Li Helan's face turned red from the scolding. He angrily retorted, Imperial Mother only knows how to scold me. How beautiful are you? The position of the commander of the Tiger Army was conferred by Imperial Brother. You took it just because you said so. How could it be given to an ignorant and incompetent person like my uncle? It would be strange if the Emperor's son-in-law wasn't angry. You didn't say anything when you didn't do it properly. Instead, you scolded me. It's ridiculous. After saying this, Li Helan wiped his tears and ran away. The Empress Dowager was so angry that her chest violently heaved up and down. Even flipping the tea table in front of her wasn't enough to vent her anger. In the end, it was her family who refused to fight for her. They let her be looked down upon outside. The Empress Dowager was angry and ordered the palace servants, Go to Marquis Qingyang's Fu and tell Marquis Qingyang that Zhang's army can't be delayed. Tell him to hurry and go to Tianmen Pass. Qin Yining naturally didn't know about this entanglement. She rested in the Fu for 2 days and then began to travel between Chong Mountain and the capital with a group of imperial bodyguards every day. She often got up before the sun rose and sat in Chong Mountain for an entire day. When the sun set, she would be sent back to the Fu by Jinghu Wei and Jingzhe. Qin Yining was doing this for the sake of the child in her belly. Otherwise, She really hated that she couldn't be like Jiziyu and never leave. However, as time passed, Qin Yining and Jiziyu became more and more anxious. Princely had already withdrawn the majority of the Imperial Guards because they had missed the best time. The small portion that was left was only for show during the day. The people had been buried in the underground palace for so long. According to Prince Li's intentions, they were no longer rescuing people, but searching for corpses. Since they were searching for corpses, there was no need to be anxious. However, Qin Yining was anxious, and so was Jiziyu. The Fu was protected by Jiziyu's men, so Qin Yining simply mobilized all of the Jinghu Wei to the mountain and listened to Jiziyu's arrangements. It was now the 29th of the 9th month. 20 days had passed since the incident. In the evening, the setting sun was as red as blood. Qin Yining's dry eyes were filled with despair, but she couldn't cry even if she wanted to. As usual, Jiziyu had people sent her down the mountain and back to the Fu, who knew that as soon as Qin Yining entered the Fu, before she could even get out of the carriage, a group of people ran over. The rider on the horse was covered in dirt. Qin Yining recognized that it was one of the Pang Xiao and Jinghu Wei. Princess Consort. Jinghu Wei's eyes lit up. He lowered his voice and said excitedly, "There's movement on the mountain." "What? Is this true?" Qin Yining was so excited that she almost cried out. Jinghu Wei nodded repeatedly. Prince Consort Ji said that he heard a response, but it was blocked by a rock. "I'm afraid that they won't be able to dig it out in a short time." Princess Consort, do you want to go back to the mountain? Chapter 617. Qin Yining urged the driver along the way. She was so anxious that she could not care about anything else. Her hands tightly gripped the window frame and the cushion. Fine beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. She could not calm down at all. She heard a voice. Could it be Pang Xiao? What if Li Qitian harmed Pang Xiao underground? What if Pang Xiao had already died and only Li Qitian was found? Bing Tang helped her wipe her sweat with a handkerchief. He squeezed her hand a little harder. "Wang Fei, calm down. Wang, you must be saved. Don't scare yourself." Qin Yining's ears were buzzing. She did not hear Bing Tang's words. Bing Tang anxiously grabbed Qin Yining's hand and pinched the acupuncture point between her thumb and index finger. "Bing Tang, Wang Fei, Wang, you must be safe and sound. Don't panic." Qin Yining was in so much pain that she quivered. Her thoughts gradually became clear. She knew Bing Tang was right. She did not know what would happen when they reached the mountain. She had to calm down in order to command the situation. If someone wanted to harm Pang Xiao when he was about to be rescued, she would be able to remedy the situation in time. Qin Yining took a few deep breaths to calm herself down. She nodded and said, "I'm fine." Bing Tang breathed a sigh of relief. He held Qin Yining's hand tightly and kept comforting her. Not only was Qin Yining nervous, even Bing Tang and Ji Yun could not help but be nervous. Although the days of waiting were hard, they still had hope if there was no news. Once they received the news that something had happened to Wang Yi, as servants, they did not know what to do, let alone the Wang Fei, who was deeply in love with Wang Yi. Bing Tang and Ji Yun admired Qin Yining from the bottom of their hearts. If it was them, they were not sure if they could be as strong as Qin Yining. The carriage quickly and steadily arrived at Mt. Chuan. Qin Yining put on a slide and was carried to the scene by the guards. At this time, the sky had already darkened, and the night was pitch black. There were no stars and no moon. From afar, one could see many of Jiziyu's personal attendants and the elite tiger guards holding torches. The smoke from the torches gradually blended into the night. Their breaths were filled with the smell of burning torches and damp soil after the rain. Qin Yining got off the slide and walked over with a hand on her waist as a servant girl waited on her. The closer she got, the clearer the movements in the crowd became. At this time, everyone was digging with all their might and kept reminding each other. Jiziyu even went into action with his sleeves rolled up. He kept reminding the people inside, "Move back a bit, in case there are falling rocks at the entrance." Qin Yining pursed her lips and stood where she was. She knew she could not help and would only be a hindrance if she went up, so she just watched from afar. Now that the matter was about to be resolved, Qin Yining's heart finally calmed down. She believed that Pang Xiao would be safe. Otherwise, no matter what happened, Qin Yining believed she could bear and face it. Ji Ziyu and his men carefully dug with the help of the torches. As they dug, they talked to the people inside. Because the rocks and soil in the middle were too thick and the digging noise was too loud, the people outside could not hear what the people inside were talking about. They could not tell who was talking from the voices, but everyone kept reminding the people inside. It was as if they could feel more at ease when they heard the voices from the other side. Qin Yining stared at the digging area expectantly and did not want to miss any details. Everyone had been working hard to dig for a full 2 hours before they were finally able to move the large and small stones away. Fortunately, it had rained a few days ago, so the soil was not as soft as before. Otherwise, as they dug, the soil around the hole would fall into the hole at the same time, and everyone's efforts would soon be in vain. Okay, I see it. Quick, give me a hand. Give me a hand. Soon, Qin Yining vaguely saw a pair of hands digging out of the hole. Ji Ziyu and a few soldiers grabbed the hands. After everyone quickly moved the soil around them, the owner of the hands poked his head out. It was Li Qiqian. Qin Yining clenched his fists tightly. He could not hide the disappointment in his eyes. Soon, the disappointment was replaced by worry. Li Qiqian was saved. What about Pang Xiao? Ji Ziyu pulled Li Qiqian's hand. When the hole expanded to a certain extent, he pulled him out with all his might. The two of them fell to the ground together, and the hole immediately collapsed again. Li Qiqian was covered in mud and blood. His face was black, and only his teeth and the whites of his eyes were white. He sat on the ground in a daze. Your Majesty? Have you been hurt? Get up quickly. Ji Ziyu helped Li Qiqian stand up. Ji Ziyu and the others looked at the emperor, who was covered in mud and blood. His entire body exuded the smell of mold and decay. They were stunned for a moment before they bowed in unison. Greetings to your Majesty. Qin Yining came back to his senses and also bowed with the help of Bing Tang and Ji Yun. Li Qiqian's eyes were dull. He could not believe that he had walked out of the underground palace alive. He looked up and saw the pitch-black night sky. His breath no longer smelled like mold in the underground palace. The smell of decay on his body was also washed away by the fresh air. He was saved. He was really saved. Li Qiqian had been trapped in the underground palace for so long that he had almost forgotten his identity as the emperor. Now that he saw the people kneeling on the ground, he found his place again. Everyone, please rise. Looking at the situation in front of him, Li Qiqian could not help but frown. This was because he only knew Ji Ziyu and Qin Yining. The rest of the people who helped dig seemed to be Pang Xiao's attendants. The rest should be Ji Ziyu's subordinates. Other than that, he did not see any other court officials. Why did no court officials or generals come to his rescue? Why did he not see any eunuchs from the palace? Could it be that the Empress Dowager, and his relatives were not worried about him? The underground palace was completely dark. Li Qiqian was not sure how long he had been buried underground, but he was sure that the situation outside seemed to be developing in a direction he did not want. While everyone was bowing, Qin Yining had already stood up. She quickly walked to the entrance of the cave and knelt down. She used her hands to dig at the soil with difficulty. The fine stones scratched her fingertips, and blood mixed into the wet soil. She continued to dig with her hands as if she did not feel the pain at all. After all the formalities, Li Qiqian just stood there without saying a word. He also did not have any intention of ordering people to continue digging. Was Pang Xiao not inside? Wang Yi, are you inside? Qin Yining pressed her face against the soil and asked loudly. She did not hear a response from inside, but her voice made Li Qiqian come back to his senses. Li Qiqian had a conflicted expression on his face. He looked at Qin Yining digging with 2 servant girls, then looked at Ji Ziyu and the other soldiers in front of him, who were looking at him with shining eyes. Li Qiqian finally cleared his throat and said, "Don't just pay your respects. Prince Zhongshuan is still inside." Qin Yining's hands paused. She suddenly turned around to look at Li Qiqian with an expression of ecstasy. Ji Ziyu's eyes lit up. He hurriedly accepted the order and said, "Yes, your majesty." Then he led people forward to replace Qin Yining and the other two. Qin Yining was helped away by Bing Tang. She stared blankly in the direction of the excavation. Li Qiqian looked at Qin Yining with a big belly. He did not know how long she had been standing there in such a sorry state. He felt a wave of discomfort in his heart. Chapter 618. Compared to the gorgeously dressed empress and imperial concubines in front of him, Li Qiqian was now more envious of Qin Yining's true feelings towards Pang Xiao. Ji Ziyu continued to lead people to dig. Qin Yining couldn't help, so he turned around and ordered Ji Yun, "Take some people down the mountain and return to the Fu. Bring some clothes and order people to prepare hot water. Wang Yi will need it when he comes out." Qin Yining glanced at Li Qiqian's bloodstains that had already turned black under the night sky. He could smell the pungent smell of blood from far away. He added, "Your Majesty also needs to change clothes and wash up, so that he won't catch a cold from a cold." Ji Yun complied, then turned around and called for 2 imperial bodyguards to follow her down mountain. Li Qiqian listened to Qin Yining's instructions and smiled. Prince Zhongshuan is still the most attentive. Qin Yining bent his knees and smiled. "Your Majesty needs to rest for a while. You can change clothes and wash up later." Bing Tang brought over some crude pottery bowls and pots, as well as some sorghum flatbread. He poured a bowl of warm water and presented it to Li Qiqian with both hands. Li Qiqian took it and drank it in one gulp, not caring about his image. Seeing that he drank the water in a hurry, Qin Yining ordered Bing Tang to continue pouring water for Li Qiqian, saying, "Your Majesty, please have some flatbread." Li Qiqian was actually so hungry that his chest was sticking to his back. He didn't care about his dirty hands and took a bite of the flatbread. He didn't know how long he had been trapped in the underground palace. When the explosion occurred, he, Li Guanwen, and Pang Xiao escaped to the only underground palace that didn't have any fire. However, the collapse of the underground palace was very serious. Pang Xiao ran fast and was lucky, but he and Li Guanwen were not so lucky. They were buried by the falling stone slabs and stones. Fortunately, the stone formed a triangular space, and Li Guanwen loyally protected his master, blocking for him, so he was not smashed to death on the spot. Li Guanwen was already seriously injured at that time. However, being buried under a pile of rocks without any water or food, he would die if he made a mistake. Li Qiqian began to carefully move the stones, trying to dig a way out. Li Guanwen was dead. Li Qiqian could only rely on himself. He didn't know how long he stayed in that small space. He was so thirsty that he even drank his own urine. He was so hungry that he even drank Li Guanwen's blood and ate Li Guanwen's flesh. The 2-legged sheep really didn't taste good, especially when it was eaten raw. But Li Qiqian didn't want to die. He didn't want to give up. After he ate an arm, he finally found a way out. In case he couldn't find food, he took Li Guanwen's other arm as food. He walked and walked, and the smell of blood on his body made him numb. In the pitch-black environment, he didn't know where the way out was. Then he smelled the smell of roasted meat. Following the smell of roasted fat, he saw the light of the fire. He also saw Pang Xiao, who was sitting in front of the fire, eating the tribute and roasting the rat meat. At that time, his face and body were covered in Li Guanwen's blood, and he was holding Li Guanwen's arm in his hand. Li Qiqian remembered the way Pang Xiao looked at him at that time. It was as if he wanted to turn back time. The side he didn't want people to see the most was still seen by Pang Xiao. There were people guarding the imperial mausoleum all year round, and the tributes were often changed. The noodles used to make the tributes were soaked in oil. After being in the underground palace for a long time, although there was a strange and bitter smell of the oil, the tributes were still edible. However, Pang Xiao had found the tributes before him. Li Qiqian followed Pang Xiao to find the spring in the underground palace. He was afraid that Pang Xiao would kill him, but he also had to wait for Pang Xiao to give him food. Li Qiqian hated that he couldn't erase this kind of memory. Just now, for a moment, he hated that he couldn't tell everyone that there was no one else in the underground palace. Just let Pang Xiao be buried in there. But on second thought, Qin Yining was such a stubborn person. She would definitely continue to dig if she wanted to see Pang Xiao dead or alive. It would be fine if she could find Pang Xiao's corpse. But if Pang Xiao was saved, she would spread the news. Others would definitely criticize him. Li Qiqian couldn't let his character be tainted. That was why he told Jiziyu and the others that Pang Xiao was still underground. The taste of the sorghum biscuits in his mouth washed away the taste of blood. Li Qiqian ate 2 of them with warm water before he felt a little better. At this time, Qin Yining had already reached the entrance of the cave. Wang Yi, can you hear me? I'm Jilan. Jiziyu shouted as he dug. After all, they had just rescued Li Qiqian. Although soil and stones had collapsed and blocked the entrance again, it was still much easier than when they first started digging. I can't hear you. Pang Zhao's voice came from the entrance of the cave. Through the layers of soil, his voice was very muffled. But to Qin Yining, this was simply the sound of nature. Qin Yining's eyes were filled with tears. He gritted his teeth and didn't rush overexcitedly. At this time, the safest thing for Pang Xiao was to wait quietly and not cause trouble for Jiziyu and the others. After digging for another incense stick's worth of time, the entrance of the cave finally widened. Jiziyu grabbed Pang Xiao's hand and pulled him out of the cave. Then, the entrance of the cave that only allowed one person to pass through collapsed again. Alan, Pang Xiao hugged Jiziyu and patted his shoulder with a smile. Thank you. Jiziyu smiled, revealing his neat white teeth. He didn't care that Pang Xiao was covered in soil and patted him hard on the back. He shook his head and said, "Is there anyone else inside? How are you?" Jiziyu lowered his head to size Pang Xiao up. He saw that Pang Xiao's robe was dirty, but it didn't have any bloodstains. Obviously, Pang Xiao had it easier than Li Qiqian. Pang Xiao said, "There's no one alive down there. Where's your majesty?" Jiziyu stepped aside and said, "Your majesty is here." The moment Jiziyu stepped aside, Pang Xiao saw his wife who was in a sorry state with a big belly. Sister-y? Pang Xiao couldn't believe his eyes. This was Mount Chongshan, which was quite a distance away from the capital. Qin Yining was also pregnant. Moreover, they were found at random times. This could only mean that Qin Yining had been waiting for him on the mountain all this time, waiting for him to come out. Pang Xiao couldn't be bothered to salute Li Qiqian. He walked around Jiziyu and quickly walked to Qin Yining. He stretched out his arms and slowly hugged her. Sister E, I'm sorry for making you worry. Qin Yining buried her face in Pang Xiao's shoulder. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Pang Xiao was covered in soil, but she didn't care at all. She just pressed herself tightly against Pang Xiao's chest and whispered, "Bodhisattva bless you. You're fine. You're fine." "Yes, I'm fine. Sister E, don't be agitated. You have to think about the child." His large hand touched Qin Yining's cheek, leaving a few mud marks on her face. "Look at how much weight you've lost. How long have I been in the underground palace? Have you never had a proper meal before? It's been 20 days. Qin Yining's tears left 2 white tear stains on her dirty little face. "I thought you were already." Pang Xiao didn't know that she had survived in the underground palace for 20 days. Chapter 619. Saved 3. How could Qin Yining control her emotions at this time? She had been in fear for so many days. Pang Xiao had an accident. She had almost been assassinated by the Tianjizi. Her father had almost been taken away. Her family had been in chaos when they learned that something had happened to Pang Xiao. Everything was on her shoulders, but in order to not harm the child in her womb, she could not even let go of her emotions and cry. The pain she felt was indescribable. Now that Pang Xiao was safe and sound, why did she have to suppress herself? Qin Yining threw herself into Pang Xiao's arms and sobbed. Even so, she still controlled herself and did not cry. But her sobbing like a kitten made Pang Xiao's heart ache even more. "Be good, don't cry. I'm fine. If you cry, you'll have a headache. Don't cry, okay?" Pang Xiao clumsily helped her wipe her tears. However, he was covered in mud and his hands only made her face even dirtier. Jiziyu stood at the side and panted tiredly as he leaned on a shovel. He looked at the figures of Pang Xiao and Qin Yining hugging each other and couldn't help but smile. Li Qitian had just washed her face. She looked at Pang Xiao with an unfathomable expression. Jiziyu soldiers and the Jinghu Wei led by Huzi were either sitting or lying down. They looked at Pang Xiao's protective appearance, and all of them grinned. Their dirty faces revealed their neat white teeth. It was slightly comical, but very sincere. Qin Yining cried for a while before she felt better. When she stood up, she found that she had become the focus of everyone's gaze. She couldn't help but blush as she lowered her head and retreated. Pang Zhao's large hand lovingly touched her face and successfully left 3 mud marks on her face. Off to the side, Huzi, who had been watching the commotion for a long time, was so amused that she chuckled. Wang Yi, why don't you take a look at yourself before getting involved in this mess? Her words made all the men laugh. Pang Xiao waved his fist at Huzi, then turned around with a smile and cupped one hand in the other before saluting Li Qitian. Your Majesty, I have lost my composure. Please forgive me, Your Majesty. Li Qitian gently smiled and waved his hand. It's okay. There's no need to be so polite between you and me. Besides, you're a young couple. I can understand. In the eyes of the soldiers, the emperor was high and mighty. Now that they saw him being so approachable with their own eyes, it really surprised everyone. Huzi fetched a basin of water for Pang Xiao to wash her face. At this moment, Ji Yun, who had been sent down the mountain by Qin Yining, hurriedly came up the mountain with 2 bodyguards. Qin Yining was a little surprised and said, "Why are you back so soon?" Ji Yun said with a serious expression, "Princess, we couldn't go down the mountain at all. The situation outside was not right." The foot of the mountain was surrounded by many people. Those people claimed that they were here to catch Tayton spies. When they saw that I was going down the mountain, they even interrogated me and asked me about the situation on the mountain. They asked me if I had found anything. Everyone quieted down and looked at Ji Yun, who had replied. Qin Yining asked, "Did you tell them?" "No, I saw that the situation was not right. How would I dare to reveal what happened on the mountain? I only said that Princess ordered me to go down the mountain and go home to get something." Qin Yining nodded and looked at Pang Xiao questioningly. Pang Xiao looked at Jiziyu. "Who dares to come to the mountain to catch spies at this juncture? Don't they know that you are here to rescue Your Majesty?" Jiziyu said calmly, "Maybe Prince Li can't bear it anymore." "Prince Li?" Li Qitian narrowed his eyes. Jiziyu said, "The Empress Dowager ordered Prince Li to be the regent of the country, and the Empress Dowager will listen to the government from behind the curtain. Maybe Prince Li's spies noticed the movement on the mountain." It was an understatement, but it clearly stated the stakes. Prince Li was in power and didn't want to let go. As long as Li Qitian was really buried in the underground palace, Prince Li could really ascend to that position. Was this the reason why there was no one at the scene to rescue him? Li Qitian said with an ashen face. "No matter how many people there are at the foot of the mountain, can they be stronger than the Tiger Army? Jilan, I order you to immediately dispatch the Tiger Army to destroy those traitors." Jiziyu cupped his hands. Replying to Your Majesty, this subject is nothing except for the position of Prince Consort that hasn't been revoked by the Princess Royal, and there's no reason to take away the title of nobility. The current commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army is Marquis Qingyang. What? Li Qitian gritted his teeth and roared. This is nonsense. Li Qitian knew what kind of person Marquis Qingyang was. Now that the situation was tense, the Tiger Army might go to the battlefield at any time. How could someone like Marquis Qingyang be the commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army? Is this the Empress Dowager's decree? Replying to Your Majesty, yes. Li Qitian's veins popped out on his forehead, and he clenched his fists. He was trapped in the underground palace and didn't know if he was dead or alive. His wife didn't come to guard him like Qin Yining, and his mother was busy seizing power and didn't care about him. Didn't she think that if Prince Li was ambitious, would he still be alive as the emperor? Even if he was alive, he would let Prince Li find a way to kill him. The people at the foot of the mountain who used the excuse of capturing Tayton spies were the evidence. Wait, Tayton spies? Why did they say they were here to capture Tayton spies? Why didn't they find a more reliable reason? If the Titan came to the capital, what would Zhou's border guards do? Your Majesty, Jiziyu said again, the Titan have already broken through 3 passes. The Dragon Legion has already retreated to Tianmen Pass and is waiting for reinforcements. Li Qitian's head was buzzing. It had only been 20 days, and so many things had happened outside. If he still didn't come out, would Zhou be persecuted and destroyed? Li Qiqian said in a deep voice, I know. We can talk about the rest later. Right now, it's important to think of a way to get down the mountain safely. Jiziyu nodded and ordered the person beside him. Go down and see the situation. If you see them, say that you were ordered to go back to the prince's residence to help me get a change of clothes. I plan to continue fighting on the mountain. Your Majesty and Prince Zhongshuan must not leak the news that they have been rescued. Yes. The trusted aide immediately received the order and ran away. It didn't take long for him to return like a cloud in defeat. Replying to Your Majesty, the people at the foot of the mountain have already begun to narrow the encirclement. Prince Li ordered that we can't let the Titan spies go. We plan to search inch by inch. Li Qiqian gritted his teeth and squeezed out a sentence. Prince Li, how dare you? The mountain was silent. Jiziyu's trusted aide and Jinghu Wei all had serious expressions. Everyone had been working on a mountain for more than 20 days. During this period, they could only take turns to rest. They had been digging almost non-stop, and everyone was exhausted. Moreover, there were less than 50 people. Since the people at the foot of the mountain could surround the entire mountain, their numbers couldn't be underestimated. With such a disparity in strength, if they really fought, their chances of winning were not high. Everyone became nervous. The other party would rather kill 1,000 by mistake than let one go. If they forcefully broke through, they might not be their match. Pang Xiao shook his head and sighed. The situation has actually developed to this point. It seems that it won't be easy for Your Majesty to get down the mountain safely. Chapter 620. How could Li Qitian not know that it was not easy to leave the mountain? Although Pang Xiao was telling the truth, Li Qitian still felt that there was a hint of mockery in his words. Now, there was no one he could trust on the mountain except for Jiziyu. Although Pang Xiao did not intend to kill him in the underground palace, he did not show much respect to him either. Moreover, Pang Xiao had seen the most embarrassing side of him in his life. Li Qitian felt that his dignity as an emperor could not be maintained in front of Pang Xiao. What was the difference between his situation now and when he was in the underground palace? They were both begging for food and had to rely on others to survive. Li Qitian was conflicted and bitter. He did not know how to choose between his dignity as an emperor and his survival. He did not know how to behave in a more dignified manner. By this time, Qin Yining had already wiped his face and combed his hair again. Seeing the serious expressions on everyone's faces, Li Qitian's expression was particularly interesting. After thinking for a while, he understood the crux of the matter. Since Pang Xiao did not take the opportunity to kill Li Qitian in the underground palace, it meant that he recognized that Li Qitian's survival was more beneficial than detrimental. Since they had already come to this point, they might as well help him until the end. Thinking of this, Qin Yining said, it's better to make a decision as soon as possible. If their people rush up, it will be too late to hide. The situation on the mountain was clear at a glance. They were surrounded. Li Qitian and Pang Xiao were rescued at the same time. Naturally, both of them had to hide. Where could these two live people hide? Li Qitian furrowed his brows and looked around for a suitable hiding place. Jiziyu said, Your Majesty does not need to worry. If we can't fight, Wang Yi and I will lead our brothers to escort Your Majesty out of the encirclement. Pang Xiao shook his head. To share Your Majesty's worries, I have the same intention as Marquis Ding Bei. However, forcibly breaking out of the encirclement is not a foolproof plan. Your Majesty can't just leave the mountain. What we need to do is to let Your Majesty return to the palace and let Prince Li obediently hand over the power of regent. Jiziyu thought for a while and nodded in agreement. You're right. I was too anxious. Li Qitian frowned and said, If you want Prince Li to hand over the power must take it back. Something happened to His Majesty here. Empress Dowager did this for the sake of the stability of the country. If Empress Dowager knows that His Majesty is safe, she will take back her power immediately. Qin Yining analyzed. So Commander Princely will never want His Majesty to see Empress Dowager successfully. This makes things even more difficult. Everyone sighed. At this time, Hu Zi, who was in charge of scouting ahead, ran over. Replying to Your Majesty, Wang Yi, Marquis Dingbei, the light at the foot of the mountain is getting closer. It's better to make a decision early. Pang Xiao pursed his lips and narrowed his long and narrow eyes. He already had an idea. But with his status, if he said this now, Li Qiqian might misunderstand him even more. Qin Yining said, "If you want to see the Empress Dowager, you must first quietly escort Your Majesty out of the encirclement without alerting Prince Li. So, it's impossible to force your way in." He looked at Li Qiqian and said hesitantly, "Your Majesty, I have an idea, but it's too offensive." Pang Zhao's eyes flashed, and he looked at Qin Yining curiously. Li Qiqian was anxious. At this critical juncture, he didn't have time to think about anything else. The most important thing was to firmly grasp the throne. Since ancient times, there was a saying that one could endure hardships to gain courage. What was he afraid of? "Prince Zhongshuan, please speak. We won't blame you." Qin Yining nodded, then went over to Li Qiqian, Pang Xiao, and Jiziyu and said this. Pang Xiao couldn't help but sigh. There really was such a wonderful fate in the world. They really were telepathic and thought of the same thing. Jiziyu nodded seriously. "I think it's feasible, but Your Majesty will be wronged." Li Qiqian's mouth twitched. If he listened to Qin Yining, he would have another black mark in his life. He would really lose face. But if he didn't listen to her, he couldn't think of a second way. After thinking about it for a long time, Li Qiqian sighed. A real man knows when to yield and when not. "Okay, I'll listen to you." Seeing that Li Qiqian agreed, Qin Yining called Bing Tang and Ji Yan over and gave them a few instructions. The two of them went to prepare with a serious expression. Pang Xiao and Li Qiqian looked at each other and shook their heads with wry smiles, then went to change clothes. After a short while, two tall and burly women were freshly done. Young Man and Xieyu, who were good at disguising themselves, weren't with Qin Yining and Pang Xiao. Fortunately, Ji Yun and Bing Tang were skillful. They shaved their faces and changed into women's clothes and cloaks that Qin Yining had prepared for them in the carriage. They combed their hair and even put flowers on it. Although the clothes didn't fit and the two of them looked very masculine as servants, they could fool them under the cover of night as long as they didn't open their mouths. Later, I'll pretend that I'm worried about Wang Yi and that my pregnancy is affected. Marquis Dingbei is worried that he won't be able to explain it to his brothers if something happens to me, so he wants to send me down the mountain. Your Majesty and Wang Yi will pretend to be the servants I brought and take care of me in the carriage. Qin Yining supported his waist with both hands. His bulging abdomen was the best excuse now. I believe that if they want to catch Tayden's spies, they won't be unable to recognize my and Prince Consort Ji's faces. Moreover, even if Prince Li is ambitious, he will want to be justified. He won't make things difficult for a pregnant woman like me. Li Qiqian nodded repeatedly as he listened. The plan was good. However, in order to survive, he had to pretend to be a woman and put on makeup. His heart was filled with anger. The most important thing was that Pang Xiao looked better than him, even if he dressed up as a woman. Li Qiqian couldn't describe his feelings. As the emperor, he was inferior to others in every aspect. Pang Xiao nodded and said, Your Majesty, this subject thinks that this plan is very good. Later, you will follow us back to the prince's mansion. As for how to deal with Prince Li, we will discuss it when we return to the prince's mansion. If this subject and my wife can't think of a good plan, this subject's father-in-law is still in the mansion. Qin Huayan, who was known as the Wise Pan and could be said to be the model of a clever person. With him around, it seemed that any problem could be solved. However, for Li Qiqian, who had just issued an edict to remove Qin Huaiyuan from his position for no reason. Asking Qin Huaiyuan for help when something happened was like slapping him in the face. However, what could he do if he didn't go? Now that Pang Xiao dared to invite him to the prince's mansion in front of so many people and even took on the responsibility to help him think of a solution, Li Qiqian knew that Pang Xiao didn't have any killing intent towards him. At least, he didn't have any now. It was already very good that Pang Xiao was willing to help. Li Qiqian couldn't ask for anything else. Thinking of this, Li Qiqian nodded. This is very good. Qin Yining then turned to instruct Bing Tang and Ji Yun, who had already changed into men's clothing. Later, you will pretend to be soldiers and continue to dig here with everyone. Remember to make your faces dirty and don't let anyone see any clues. Yes, Wang Fei, don't worry. We all understand. Bing Tang smiled and nodded. Qin Yining said, don't worry. Since Prince Li wants the throne, he wants to be justified. He also wants a reputation. Right now, he definitely doesn't have any concrete evidence that your majesty has been saved. Otherwise, he would have already come up the mountain. Continue to dig here and act as if you were in a hurry to rescue. When Prince Li's people come up the mountain, they won't harm your lives. Otherwise, he won't be able to explain himself to the outside world. At most, he will encircle you and search the mountain. You will suffer on the mountain for a night. Tomorrow morning, Prince Consort Ji and I will return to the mountain and continue to dig with you. At that time, Prince Li's people will have to withdraw. Yes, Wang Fei, Bing Tang, and Ji Yin responded in unison. Huzi also nodded along with Jing Wei. He didn't forget to praise her with a smile. Wang Fei is indeed the daughter of wise Pan, and you're simply a female Zhuge. The Jing Wei nodded in agreement. They originally admired Pang Xiao and respected Qin Yining. During the time when Pang Xiao was in trouble, the Jing Wei had seen Qin Yining's methods. They were already very impressed with her. Now that Qin Yining could be so meticulous, they weren't surprised at all. Ji Ziyu ordered his trusted aides, do not reveal anything about what happened on the mountain. Yes, the trusted aides all solemnly responded. Qin Yining, Pang Xiao, Ji Ziyu, and Li Qiqian quietly walked down the mountain. They avoided people and sat in the carriage. The carriage was very spacious, but because other than Qin Yining, a pregnant woman, there were 2 tall and strong men stuffed inside. It seemed very crowded. Ji Ziyu sat at the shaft of the carriage and acted as the driver for Qin Yining. The carriage sped down the gentle slope of the mountain. In just a few breaths, they met a group of people who were going up the mountain. These people were all wearing the uniforms of the 5 cities warden's office. The torches in their hands lit up the surroundings. They saw a carriage coming down, and the driver was Ji Ziyu. The group of people were stunned for a moment. Ji Ziyu frowned and scolded. Get out of the way. People who had experienced the battlefield had an imposing aura. These people who lived like princes in the capital naturally couldn't compare to the soldiers at the border. After being yelled at by Ji Ziyu, they were somewhat afraid. The leader of the group was calm. He cupped his hands and said, Prince Consort Ji, may I know who is in the carriage? Ji Ziyu raised his hand and lashed out with his whip. The whip whistled through the air in front of that person, scaring him into closing his eyes. However, Ji Ziyu knew his limits and didn't have any intention of hurting this person. The whip didn't touch his skin. Prince Zhongshuan's consort. Her pregnancy has been affected. I want to send her down the mountain to see a doctor. Why aren't you moving out of the way? Prince Consort Ji, we are here on Prince Li's orders to capture the Taitan spy. If we let the spy leave, it will be difficult to explain ourselves later. We hope that Prince Consort Ji will understand and allow us to search the carriage. Ji Ziyu's expression was gloomy. This time, he didn't show any mercy. He lashed out with his whip at that person's shoulder. Impudent. The person in the carriage is Prince Zhongshuan's consort. How can I let you search her as you wish? The princess consort's pregnancy has been affected. If anything happens to her, how many lives can you afford to lose? That person sucked in a breath of cold air from the pain. He clutched his shoulder with a pale face and couldn't speak. When his companions saw Ji Ziyu's rude and unreasonable behavior, he couldn't help but mock. Could it be that there really is a Taytan spy in the carriage? Is that why Prince Consort Ji won't allow us to search? How dare you? Jizu narrowed his eyes. He looked like he was about to kill someone. The people who were searching the carriage were so scared that they took a few steps back. Chapter 621. Jizu turned his head and looked worriedly at Qin Yining. His tone became more conciliatory. Even so, Wang Fei is precious. Lan has to protect the Brotherhood. Wang Yi is not here and naturally has to take care of Wang Ye's family. These nameless soldiers dare to humiliate Wang Fei like this. It is hateful. I understand Marquis Ye's meaning, Qin Yining said weakly, but now is not the time to argue with them. As he spoke, he lifted the curtain a little more. Come take a look. My carriage is small. Other than me, there are only 2 experienced servants on the carriage. My mother-in-law specially found them to serve me. Quickly let me in after you have seen. My stomach is really not feeling well. If something happens, think about whether your hungry brains can bear the consequences. The man who had been whipped by Jizu had already tasted Jizu's toughness and fierceness. Seeing Qin Yining's delicate and frowning appearance, it was obvious that she had a miscarriage and wasn't faking it. In his heart, he already believed a little. The leaders looked at each other and then walked together to the carriage. They lifted the curtain and looked inside. There were 2 stout older women inside, both of whom were wearing makeup. The slightly plump older woman had at least 2 kilograms of powder on her face and red lips. The brothers expressed deep suspicion about the eyes of the servants of the Wang Fu. They saw that there was no hiding place in the carriage and then looked under the carriage. After confirming that there was no hiding place, they retreated and bowed to Jizu and Qin Yining. Prince Consort Ji, Wang Fei, we're just following Prince Li's orders. We have offended you. Qin Yining tiredly put down the curtain. Jizu snorted coldly and used his whip to point in the direction of the people. He did not waste any more time and hurriedly drove the carriage down the mountain. The people of the warden's office of the 5 cities saw Jizu drive the carriage away and couldn't help but discuss. It seems like people saying that Prince Consort Ji and Prince Zhongshuan don't get along is pure nonsense. Otherwise, why would they be willing to take care of Prince Zhongshuan's family at this time? That's right. The day before yesterday, in order to protect the people of the prince's estate, Prince Consort Ma had a direct confrontation with the Marquis of Qingyang. Not necessarily. Didn't you see what the princess consort looked like? Such a beauty. If she were to look at me, my entire body would go limp. If she were to beg me in a coquettish voice, I would do it even if she wanted my life. Maybe there's some unspeakable relationship between them. There are so many dirty things going on between these nobles. The group continued to head up the mountain as they discussed among themselves. In the carriage, Pang Xiao and Li Qitian watched from the window as the torches carried by those people went further and further away. Only then did they both sit down and return to the carriage. Li Qitian smiled at Qin Yining. Sister-in-law's idea is good. It was thanks to sister-in-law's quick-wittedness that we were able to leave the mountain this time. Unexpectedly, he resumed calling Pang Xiao his brother. This was also the first time he was so close and polite to Qin Yining. Qin Yining immediately understood Li Qitian's meaning. In the current situation, if Li Qitian still wanted the throne, he would have to rely on Pang Xiao and Jizu. If one of these 2 people refused to help and instead played dirty tricks, Li Qitian's chances of winning were almost 0. Therefore, he was playing the friendship card. Qin Yining was naturally happy to cooperate. She said shyly and fearfully, "Your Majesty is overpraising me. This subject's wife is only a woman and only has a little bit of cleverness. How can I bear your Majesty's praise?" Li Qitian waved his hand and smiled. "What are you talking about? Sister-in-law can be called a heroine, a female Zhuge Liang. No one could deny this point. So now, she was not a sinner who killed a Narikan and brought war to Dezhou." Qin Yining couldn't help but admire Li Qitian's ability to adapt to circumstances. It was no wonder that he could achieve great things and become the founding monarch of a country. This person's bottom line was completely different from ordinary people. Pang Xiao put her arm around Qin Yining's shoulder and laughed. Brother, don't exaggerate. Sister E is thin-skinned and will be shy. Qin Yining's mouth twitched. Pang Xiao didn't have any psychological barriers when she called Li Qitian brother. It could be seen that compared to Li Qitian, Pang Xiao's bottom line was also very different. Regardless of what Li Qitian was thinking, on the surface, he was very happy that Pang Xiao called him brother. Pang Xiao didn't kill him and was willing to show that she was close to him. This meant that the cooperation between him and Pang Xiao could still continue. Li Qitian's heart calmed down a little. He took a handkerchief and wiped the rouge on his mouth before turning to wipe his face. Qin Yining wanted to remind him that he could wipe it off. After all, he was an emperor. In order to escape, he had to dress up as a woman and put on makeup on his face. If this kind of dark history was seen by anyone, it could be dug up. Qin Yining didn't want the people in the Fu to see Li Qitian like this. Now that he could wipe it off himself, she didn't have to waste her breath. The carriage quickly returned to the Fu. Jiziu rushed the carriage back and gave the doorman a fright. He thought that something big had happened to Qin Yining and hurriedly sent someone inside to inform him. At the same time, he removed the threshold to let the carriage in. Jiziu didn't explain and directly drove the carriage to see Qin Garden. Hearing the commotion, Madame Ma rushed out. When she saw that Qin Yining had been sent back by Jiziu, she immediately went up to him. Alas, what's the matter? What's the matter? Grandmother, I'm fine. I'm just a little tired. The Marquis had to go down the mountain to wash up, so he escorted me back. Madame Ma heard this and heaved a sigh of relief. She smiled at Jiziu and said, Thank you very much. Jiziu smiled and waved his hand. At this moment, Qin Yining turned around and dismissed the servants who were watching at the door. He said, Don't be so alarmed. I'm fine. Go and tell my parents that I'm fine. I'll change my clothes before paying my respects. Yes. The servant outside the door answered and left. Only then did Qin Yining pat the wall of the carriage. The door curtain was lifted and two burly servants jumped out. The courtyard was dark, and there were only 2 lanterns hanging under the eaves of the corridor in the main room. The light was very dim, and Madame Ma couldn't see who it was at all. However, Qin Yining brought Ji Yun and Bing Tang with him. These 2 servants were really unfamiliar. Madame Ma couldn't help but pull Qin Yining behind her and look at him intently. His eyes immediately widened when he saw what was on the screen. Big. Pang Xiao smiled at Madame Ma, made a shushing gesture, and reached out to hug her. Qin Yining also smiled and shook Madame Ma's hand. Madame Ma's tears immediately gushed out. When she saw that Pang Xiao had actually changed into women's clothes and came back with Qin Yining, she knew that this matter couldn't be made public. She hurriedly covered her mouth and nodded repeatedly. She patted Pang Xiao's shoulder twice and turned to walk into the room. The group of people entered the room. Qin Yining sent Xian Yun and Lian Xiaozhou out. He asked them to wait in the courtyard. Except for Qin Huaiyuan, everyone else had to be notified first. After the 2 of them left, Pang Xiao helped Madame Ma sit up. Then he knelt down and kowtowed to Madame Ma. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.